Portola Valley Town Council meeting to order. Tonight is November 10, 2021. Welcome. Roll call, please, Sharon.
Councilmember Alves.
Here.
Councilmember Warnikoff.
Here.
Councilmember Richards.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hughes.
Here.
Mayor Derwin.
Here. Thank you, Sharon. Oral communications. This is the time in the evening when you may speak to something that is not on the agenda, knowing that we cannot take action and we cannot have a discussion. You may speak once for up to 3 minutes. Sharon, is there anyone in the public who would like to speak under oral communications?
Like Bob Turcott.
Bob Turcott, please speak.
Thank you. Lack of opportunity to follow up after oral comments can be frustrating for a lot of reasons. Greatest among them, for me, is factually incorrect statements made by staff or committee members in response to public comments, which happened as recently as last week. The issues in question are important enough that they warrant clarification here. Protecting public safety is the first responsibility of the town council. In fact, Article 13, Section 35, Paragraph 2 of the California Constitution reads, quote, "The protection of the public safety is the first responsibility of local government," end quote. The legislature understands this and in its housing mandates makes clear that it is not preempting the authority and responsibility of the local government with respect to safety. The ordinance amendments that the council approved in July addressed ADU mandates from the state. AB 881 is one of them. As codified, it reads that local government may, quote, "designate areas within the jurisdiction of a local agency where accessory dwelling units may be permitted. The designation of areas may be based on the adequacy of water and sewer services and the impact of accessory dwelling units on traffic flow and public safety," end quote. While not highlighted in staff presentations, in a planning commission meeting, the town attorney did confirm that indeed the ADU mandates could be excluded as needed for safety. So the council had the option to exclude the state ADU mandates from unsafe areas, which, as you know, extend far beyond our ADU restricted area based on analysis from CAL FIRE, Woodside Fire, and Mertz Consulting. The authors of SB 9 similarly took great care not to preempt the town's first responsibility. Senator Mike McGuire, a co-sponsor of SB 9, said, quote, "A local government can deny a project based off of wildfire risk. It's actually already embedded in the Housing Accountability Act. We transferred that language over. So, for example, in Novato, if Novato City Council deems that a duplex or a fourplex is a threat to public health or safety, they can deny a project," end quote. I'd quibble with the senator about the mechanism for denying an unsafe project, but his point is clear. SB 9 does not preempt the town's authority and responsibility to protect public safety. There are two mechanisms for excluding SB 9 for fire safety. One is a very high fire hazard severity zone exclusion that was discussed at length at the October 13th council meeting. This mechanism is irrelevant for Portola Valley for a couple of reasons, one of which is that the council declined CAL FIRE's recommendation in 2008 to designate such an area. The other mechanism, outlined in 65852.21 paragraph D of the government code, the implementation of SB 9, requires, quote, "objective identified written public health or safety standards," end quote, against which the safety of a proposal is evaluated. In order to fulfill its first responsibility, the town council must adopt objective written safety standards by January 1st that will allow unsafe SB 9 proposals to be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, are there others?
There are no additional hands raised.
Okay.
Yes, there are. All right. Christy Corley.
Christy.
Thank you. I'm very interested in the ordinance that you are writing. I'm hearing that some cities are doing motions, some are doing referendums, and some are doing ordinances. So I'm wondering, Craig, what we're going to be doing. And if this is not on the agenda, I would appreciate a full update since it's an urgent ordinance and of great interest to me. Thank you. Can you answer this question?
Would you like to take a stab at that?
I'll just answer briefly. The item will be coming back to our December meeting, and so at that time we'll have all the details for in the agenda packet for that meeting. We'll have all the details, but staff is still working through some of the basics. So what the form is and what the contents are still being worked
But
on.
how do residents get involved to
Christy, this
be
is
involved?
Christy. Thank you. We're done. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak or ask a question?
7562.
Good evening, Mayor Derwin and
I can't.
hello.
Are you still there?
Yes, I am here. I can
Oh,
hear
okay.
you.
All righty.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Turcott and Christy, for addressing the issues. I'm not going to repeat those, but I do have an observation. We attend many meetings, and we feel the frustration of our volunteer residents who now have to spend 3 to 4 hours on proposals on big projects, and we didn't have this before. It's my observation that there's a lot of wrong information that is posted on the website and that is communicated through staff. So I'm hoping that we can resolve this for everybody. I think that will solve some issues, and definitely, hopefully we can come to resolutions instead of more frustration. On the consent agenda, I hope we will discuss number 4. I have some questions on number 6. And I don't know if we're going to update or if there will be any discussion on number 7. Thank you.
All righty. You could actually wait and ask those questions when I move to consent. Is there anybody else who would like to speak under oral communications, Sharon?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, I'm going to wait just 1 second to see if someone's just slow to the draw. All right, we will move on to consent. Any member of the public may speak to any item on the consent agenda. You can speak once per item up to 3 minutes. However, only the council can remove an item for discussion, and only the council can vote. Sharon, would anyone like to comment on the consent agenda?
By Carolyn Vertonghen.
All righty.
Good evening. Good evening. So do you want me to address all 3 of them or just one at a time?
Well, why don't you just pack them all in your 3 minutes?
Okay, so I have a question regarding number 4, the response to the San Mateo County Grand Jury sea level rise, stating that there was not a fiscal impact. I strongly believe that our taxes are used to pay for all these board members. And then I also wanted to know, I think that there was a comment saying that we're not impacted by it, but for some reason I recall that some areas in Portola Valley get flooded and that we have to use sandbags. On number 6, changes to town bus routes. I know we have brought this up. I hope this will go to the bike pedestrian traffic safety member. Because it has not been brought up, and there's several areas that were actually examined by consultant Krupka, and we never heard back, how he's going to solve that, especially at the Portola corridor in front of Woodside Prairie. And then on number 7, update regional housing needs allocation appeal update. This is great. However, we still would like to understand the conflicting information. We have a senior planner, Adrian Smith, who's very nice, and she gave a wonderful presentation. She uses the information from ABAC, which is outdated, which is data from 2019, Now, Mrs. Smith, on the other hand, she seems to have the data for Portola Valley. We never knew when that survey was taken, and it would be appreciated to know when that survey was taken, and I don't even recall that I participated in it. So these are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Before we go on, Jeremy, did you want to make a comment? Remember? I
I'm
think
sorry, Marianne.
we're removing number 6 from the agenda tonight.
Oh, yes. There are, hold on just a second. We're pulling item number, my request is through the chair, pulling item number 6. We could.
And continuing it to another meeting, correct?
No. I don't think it needs to be continued. I'll, if it does, the council can direct me that, but I'll describe it in a moment after the vote on the other items.
Okay, all right. I think I misunderstood. I thought we were pulling, actually, okay.
Sorry.
All right, are there other members of the public who would like to comment on the consent agenda?
No additional hands are raised.
Okay, I'm going to wait just another second. All right. Would any of the council members wish to pull something on the consent agenda? Jeremy, you wanted to pull 6? Okay. Okay, do I have a motion to approve everything but item 6?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, did you get that, Sharon?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Wernicott,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Jeremy, number 6.
Through the chair, I want a mea culpa at my end. The liaisons to the Portola Valley School District actually changed. And I was working off an older list, and the 2 previous liaisons I had engaged with on the content of the letter that's before you. I don't think it requires the item to be continued. The item in front of you is a recommended letter to Samtrans in response to the changes in bus service that they made. So hopefully if the council would like to discuss that letter right now to see if it's okay and could be submitted to Samtrans. The primary issue is that we'd like to get this to them sooner than later, just so it can be part of their record as they continue the deliberations on those changes. I apologize for that error.
Okay, are there any questions or discussion, or is there a motion to approve item 6?
I move to approve item 6.
Right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Sharon.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Wernicott,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 9 on our regular agenda is a study session. We are going to welcome our new town lobbyist, Cruz Strategies, and I believe here tonight is Steve Cruz here?
It's Audrey Ratajczak from Cruise Strategies.
So Audrey Ratajczak,
Yep, you got it.
welcome, Audrey.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Jeremy, do you want me to just start, or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say a few words. So this year is the first year that the town has engaged with a lobbying firm in Sacramento. The engagement is different than the term suggests. We have not asked Cruise Strategies to do any lobbying on behalf of the town. Right now, they're being engaged as a resource to the town and staff on issues that are important to us. And there could be future engagement that could change that relationship. But right now, it's just increasing our ability to get pertinent information from Sacramento on a timely basis. So with that, Audrey, turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. Audrey Ratajczyk. I'm an associate partner at Cruise Strategies, and it's so good to see all of you on Zoom. Hopefully soon we can meet in person, and I'm excited for that. Thank you for bringing on our firm to work with you guys. It's been great working with Jeremy over the last few months. To start, I wanted to give you a brief background on myself and the firm, and then just quickly highlight a few of the top legislative bills and budget items that the legislature focused on this year. And then just a really quick recap of what we think we'll see coming back in 2022 when the legislature returns in early January. And then I think Jeremy will turn it over to all of you to hear about your legislative priorities that will help inform the work that we're doing at the state. So just as background, I started lobbying with who's the main partner at Cruise Strategies. He couldn't be here tonight as he's recovering from a health issue, but he'll be back with us shortly and is engaged on all Portola Valley issues and has been with Jeremy. So he will be back next time. But and we were formerly Gonzalez, Quintana, Hunter, and Cruz, and I started with Steve about 8 years ago. But then Steve started his own firm in 2017, and so I came over with him to work on local government issues. Before lobbying, I worked at the Department of Justice Bureau of Firearms, and I did legislative and regulatory work for them. And before that, I worked in the Capitol with Assemblymember Jeff Gorell from the Ventura area. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm excited to be able to work with all of you and for the new year that's coming up in 2022. In terms of this year, I just wanted to give you a quick update on the top priorities that the legislature had this year, many of which you're probably already familiar with. But as you know, this year at the Capitol was very atypical given the pandemic, making pretty much everything at the Capitol virtual. And then that plus the huge state budget surplus that kind of came in after the governor's original January budget resulted in a lot going on throughout the year. The governor had his California comeback tour where he wanted to tackle a lot of huge issues. So there were major budget issues on a wide variety of things that all had to be tackled in a short amount of time. So we know that next year there'll be cleanup on a lot of different issues because of just the sheer amount of time that they had to tackle all of these. But all in all, there were 836 bills that were sent to the governor, and he ended up signing 770. So it was about 92%. And then he vetoed 7%. So that's pretty typical compared to Governor Brown previously. But just quickly, a few of the highlights from the year. Broadband was huge. There was a $6 billion plan passed for broadband infrastructure for middle mile and last mile and loan loss reserve funding. And that will be flowing through the CPUC to local governments through various grants. The HAP program, the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, there was $2 billion in aid to counties, cities, and continuums of care. The governor's big project was Project Home Key and Project Room Key. So there was $1.45 billion for Project Home Key, and then Project Room Key, $150 million to help transition individuals to more permanent housing. On the waste side, I always like to mention SB 1383. There was $60 million in the budget trailer bill to provide grants to local governments to assist in implementing the SB 1383 regulations. And so CalRecycle is working on guidelines and funding for that, but there'll be grants available shortly. In terms of all grant stuff too, we provided Jeremy with a matrix of all of the grant stuff that was passed this year, and then updating it as either guidelines become available, when application deadlines will be coming out, because right now they don't have a lot of that yet since it was all passed so quickly, but we're continuously updating that every month, and we'll be sending it to Jeremy. Especially on the wildfire and the stuff that we know that is extra important to the town. So I just wanted to mention that, but there was local public health funding, $300 million. The one thing on the budget side that didn't really get done this year was transportation funding. Everything else got done, but there was some controversy over high-speed rail funds, and the legislature and the governor's office didn't reach an agreement at the end of session. All of the money that was originally passed in the earlier budget, there was $4 billion that was dedicated to transportation funding for intercity for active transportation. Well, that had a clause in it saying that if a bill did not get passed by the end of session, all that transportation money would go back to the general fund. So since a deal didn't come together, that money all went back to the general fund, but we know that that's something that they want to continue to work on over the next couple months, and hopefully an early action in January, get that transportation money back out. But that was kind of the one budget thing that didn't materialize at the end of session. And then the climate resilience funding, there was 2 bonds last year, AB 1500 and SB 45. Both of those didn't move forward, but they tried to tackle a lot of that in the actual budget instead of through the bond process. And they provided a lot of money to for droughts, for sea level rise, for wildfire protection and prevention. And then there's already been a separate bond filed through the initiative process. It still has to qualify and everything, but it would provide 2% of general fund money to water infrastructure projects. So we'll keep an eye out for that. And then just 2 quick other things I wanted to mention. There was Brown Act legislation this year that ended up passing AB 361. One of the bills was vetoed, but 361, and that provides local governments the ability to continue to operate remotely because the governor's executive order expired at the end of September. So even folks that are starting to get back in person, you know, there needs to be a little bit of a ramp up period. You can't just immediately all come back. So that provided us the flexibility to be able to continue to operate remotely. And then there was also vaccine mandate legislation that didn't end up passing. It didn't actually even really get introduced, but language was floated around that everyone had seen that got put into council. So it sounds like that will be something that comes back next year for sure. But it would have required patrons that enter a number of different industries like movie theaters, restaurants, gyms. They would have to be fully vaccinated before entering. And then it also would have required both public and private businesses, all employees to be vaccinated unless they had an exemption. And if you weren't fully vaccinated, you'd have to do a weekly test and provide those test results to the employer. So that didn't officially get passed, but something that they want to continue to work on, because as you can imagine, there was all different parties are involved in that and wanting to make sure that it works for every employer, the employee, et cetera. So they're continuing to work on that, and I expect that we'll see legislation next year. And then AB 988, there was a bill that would have made an alternative to 911 for mental health issues, and you would dial 988 instead, and it wouldn't call the police, but it would call behavioral health folks to come intervene. That didn't move forward at the end of session, but likely something that will come back next year too. So, and then there were a few other hot topics. I won't mention all of them, but there was a lot of police reform legislation. There was drought funding, bail reform. But some of those didn't materialize, and I won't go through all of them just for the sake of time, but lots and lots of big issues this year. And then Jeremy, I don't mean to take up too much time, but quickly, I wanted to let you know about some of the things that we expect to see next year. I mentioned some of them, but as you probably have seen in the news, there's already a budget surplus that's expected for next year. So we've heard from budget staff that there will likely be early action items in January to get some of that funding out so that they don't have to wait all the way till the June, July budget process. So particularly for transportation, and then probably some more COVID recovery relief stuff, hopefully for local governments as well, because that's still a hot topic on the minds of the legislature and administration. And then we expect to see the vaccine mandate stuff again. And then as always, housing and homelessness is always a big focus of the legislature, wildfire response and climate change. We think that there'll be a school bond coming back next year. And also we single payer health care bill potentially coming back. So that plus all of the initiatives that have already been introduced and the AG for title and summary. I haven't received the title and summary yet, but there's a plenty of on a variety of topics as well. So next year will be a big year in the legislature and also at the ballot. So I think that's all I have in terms of presentation, but happy to answer any questions and then turn it back to Jeremy for next steps about hearing from all of you about your legislative and budget priorities. But thank you, and it's great to meet all of you virtually.
Thank you, Audrey. That is quite a list.
Okay.
Well, members, do you have questions? Craig.
Yeah, I have a question just in the whole realm of housing. The state is putting a lot more requirements on us as towns in terms of what we need to do and trying to, I mean, not just us, every local jurisdiction in the state. And, in the current or the upcoming RENA cycle, I think Bay Area wide, we need to build about 2.5 times as many, or our allocations about 2.5 times what it was in the current cycle. And the state is making absolutely no financial provision for local jurisdictions to be able to actually afford to do that. So, we're facing having to hire 2.5 times as many building inspectors, 2.5 times as many plan checkers, 2.5 times as many everybody involved in the planning process, or planning and review and permitting process. And have you heard anything about how the state expects us to be able to do that? Is there any initiative going on to make that affordable to the local jurisdictions across the state?
Honestly, I haven't heard anything. When the legislature talks about their budget plans for housing and homelessness, it's usually, on the housing side, it's always like funding homelessness. And then on the housing side, it usually just ends up in the legislation that has to be implemented by the locals, as you're saying. So not in terms of funding to help support that, but it's a good ask that could probably be brought up with like the League of Cities and then with CSAC with the counties, because something that the associations as a whole should kind of bring forward, because everybody's facing this right now. So
yeah, and related to that, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are not 2.5 times as many building inspectors in the entire Western United States. So, we need to not just have the money to be able to hire these people, but we need to train them or find them somewhere before 2023.
Yeah, logistically, even making it work is, yeah, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
If I may, Madam Mayor, one of the things that's really remarkable about our relationship is that everything you heard and the interactions that we have are coming to the town on something of the order of $700 a month. Part of the public record, everyone knows this. So we're really appreciative that we can have this kind of efficient and important relationship with Cruise Strategies in the way that we have. The next portion of the meeting, of this presentation and study session, we wanted just to hear from each of you on the issues that you'd like Audrey to take back and continue to monitor on behalf of the town. When we started our initial engagement, there were 4 areas, 3 issues, and 1 grants that I wanted them to look at. I wanted the best list of grants that we could get. That's a very hard thing to follow because grants are spread out through multiple websites and sometimes you simply don't know what's there. And then the 3 major issues were related to wildfire, housing, and sustainability. But certainly there's other areas that are interesting to the collective council and individual council members. So that was the primary purpose of tonight's meeting, other than for you to meet Audrey, is to hear from you and share the areas that you're concerned about and would like support from Cruise Strategies. I'll turn back to the mayor.
Okay, so other than what Jeremy's already talked about, which was housing, wildfire, sustainability, were those the 3 main areas? And just funding in general, what are you guys interested in?
Before we go to this, Madam Mayor, I see there are a couple of hands up for public comment. Do we want to take public comment before we go to council discussion? It's sort of an unusual agenda item, so I don't know where we want to put that in.
I guess I was thinking we were going to roll this all together and then do public comment, but sure, let's do public comment. Sharon?
Rita Gomez.
Rita?
Hi, so welcome to our community. I see that the main things, fire, sustainability, housing, are being looked at already. But how about SB2, the issues that we have with policing in this area? SB2 keeps people that have a felon background from becoming officers, and that just passed recently. Will they be going back looking in the sheriff's department now for San Mateo County, for the officers that are coming into Portola Valley? And checking their backgrounds to see if that was an issue, and perhaps weed some of them out, especially if they had felon issues pertaining to things that we're trying to not perpetuate in our community. And so just my question is, what can you tell us about SB2? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to gang them up, and then Audrey, you can talk about it if you'd like. Is there another question out there?
Yes, Christy Corley.
Christy?
Can you start the clock again? I think that's from the last person.
Yeah.
Thank
There
you.
you go. You're welcome.
Yeah, welcome to our community. Very happy that we have somebody to report to us. I've been curious at almost every meeting on the housing bills. Can you go in more depth in talking about the housing bills, such as SB 9 and 10, to make it clear to the residents what's happening in that area? And then I noticed in the Turner report that impact fees for multi-family dwellings could be as high as $19,100 per dwelling. And for single family homes, impact fees can be as high as $30,000. So how are we gonna recoup these? And are bills coming forward to, these are unfunded mandated bills, will we be getting funded bills in the future that help us with these fees? And what does our city do? Is it a proposition? Is it a bond? How will we make up the costs? And then McGuire's fire bill, he's been working on for 3 years. Where does that one stand? Is it SB 330? And just, I think we're extremely interested in hearing the details on zoning, housing, how many houses could be on a lot split, how many houses could be on an SB 10 lot. So will we have apartments lots being split? You wait 3 years and now you can get 10 to 13 as your neighbor. So you have 10 on one lot and then 2 ADUs and 2 junior ADUs, so that now I can have 14 people as my neighbor. If that's the case, if you could comment on some of this, I would really appreciate it. And I think others in the community would as well. Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who would like to comment or ask questions?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm going to go back through these questions and pull out what I think could be answered. Audrey, do you have any insight on SB2, the
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to share. It was a very, very political bill. It was brought forward a couple of years. It didn't end up passing last year. I think they ran out of time at the end of session. So it was a priority of the California Legislative Black Caucus this year. So they brought it forward, and it was supported by the ACLU as one of the sponsors, and then opposed by many of the police organizations like the state sheriffs and the police chiefs. And so I think you captured it well of what the bill does, and I don't have too much to share beyond that. There was that plus and like 3 or 4 other police reform bills that passed this year. So I expect that we'll probably see some more stuff coming up in the next year. But I'm happy to talk about the housing bills in more detail too. I think that was the next one.
Yeah, 10 doesn't pertain to us, but SB 9, do you have any more visibility on that?
Yeah, just that, so there were a few housing bills that were part of the Senate housing package. And so they were a priority of Senate leadership, and SB 9, I think everybody pretty much knows, but allows homeowners to build 2 houses or a duplex when only one would be allowed now under zoning, and permits eligible homeowners to split their lot and add 2 more units on a second parcel. So that was passed this year. It was a priority of leadership. So it was one that ended up getting done. And then there was also AB 215 that increased the enforcement authority of HCD for violations of housing law, and it requires cities and counties to make any draft revisions to their housing elements available for public comment for at least 30 days. So that passed. And then the one that didn't move forward was AB 989 by Assemblymember Gabriel, and it would have created a new office called the Office of Housing Appeals, and would authorize a developer to appeal a local agency's decision when they were denied for a housing development project. But that ended up getting moved to the inactive file. So technically it's a 2-year bill and something that we could see come back next year. So I just wanted to flag that one because it was important to cities and counties and towns. So yeah.
And SB 3330.
So when you mentioned Stearns, McGuire's fire bill, that was, I think you're referring to SB 55, which didn't move forward this year. But McGuire's chair of Senate Gov and Finance has brought this forward, like you said, a number of times, and it's super important to him. It would limit housing developments in a very high fire severity zone within the state fire responsibility area. It was heavily opposed by the California Building Industry Association, but it is something that I'm sure McGuire will bring back next year. If it's not the same proposal, something similar, because wildfire is a very hot topic right now, and that's near and dear to McGuire's heart. So I suspect that we will probably see that next year as well.
Okay, council members, what would you like to see Audrey and Steve work on next year? Jeff.
So I know that both fire and housing are on our priorities, and I completely agree with that. The one nuance I'll add to that is just the intersection between them. You know, we've been asking different state agencies for some guidance in terms of how to meet our housing mandates safely. I don't know if there's any activity out there that would sort of help codify, just basically sort of just give us better guidance or better sort of resources for how to, for example, meet our housing element requirements safely in terms of being in a WUI. And I know there's lots of communities that are probably in the same bucket as us. So I'm curious if there's anything coming forward that would specifically address that intersection between fire safety mandates and housing mandates from the assembly. That's my first one. The other general area that I'm interested in would be energy, and specifically kind of distributed generation or electricity resources on the grid. Our Senator, Josh Becker, has introduced a bill that is now a 2-year bill, SB 562, I believe, that would sort of impose some or redefine, basically sort of create a framework for codifying GHG-free generation on a 24/7 basis. It's something Peninsula Clean Energy has worked closely with him. I'm interested in that bill, but I'm also just interested in general efforts to reform distributed generation. There was an effort to sort of take on net metering, which in the last bill, AB 1139, which did not pass, which I think the intention was good, but it was also probably very clearly supported by utilities as an effort to really sort of curtail rooftop solar. I'm sure there'll be other efforts in that area. That's something I think we'd like to sort of keep apprised of. And just the general kind of anything that's looking to sort of either enable or restrict generation within distribution grids across the state. Those are my two general areas if you have comments on them.
Okay, great. No, that's super helpful, especially the first one I had somewhat on our radar, but the second one, that's very helpful. And we work closely with Peninsula Clean Energy's lobbyists and are engaged on that. So I'll make sure we share all of that information. And we were engaged on 1139 and watching it closely. So I'll be sure we share that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, who else? Do you have any thoughts, John Richards?
Well, I'll just say this is new territory. I mean, over the time that I've been on the council for the last almost going on 13 years now, it's first time that the town has really reached out and paid attention to the fact that there's a greater community around us in California, and I think it's great. It's something that really is going to inform our decisions on a much broader basis. So I think it's fantastic. Jeff's points were the ones that I would have brought up. Issues with water are going to be definitely an issue that we have to keep an eye on here. And housing and wildfire resiliency. I think those are the big ones for me anyway.
Yeah, water, I shouldn't have just glossed over that in my presentation because that's probably the biggest thing that's coming back next year. There's the bond measure, but we also, the governor has already declared the state of emergency for the drought. So right now it's just the voluntary 15% cutbacks, but him and Wade Crowfoot at Natural Resources have already said in their presser, we reserve the right to make those more restrictive. And I suspect we'll see legislation and budget items on that next year. So I know that that's definitely one of the governor's top priorities.
Great. Okay. On that end, the use of groundwater is an issue that has come up now and again. Is really it's a county issue at this point, I guess. But
Yeah.
It's something that I think probably ought to be looked at more closely than it has been in the past.
And there was lots of Sigma funding. It was a priority for the legislature. They originally passed it and it had like 60 million for Sigma implementation, but then they came back at the end of session and added like 200 million. So we'll keep Jeremy posted on that as that money flows out too.
Okay, thanks.
Sarah?
I don't have any additional comments. I completely concur with Jeff's comments, particularly as it relates to, housing and the intersection of wildfire and the challenges there. So by far the most important topic in our town.
Craig?
Yeah, I think one thing that I don't think I heard Jeff mention, but he may have, and I just didn't hear it, is insurance issues related to fire. So we've had a lot of policy cancellations and things like that for people because we do have, fire safety issues in town. And so it's really, housing, fire, and insurance are kind of three prongs that all intersect. And so make sure insurance is in your keyword list also. And then for PG&E, Jeff talked a lot about generation. I think the state kind of punted on fixing PG&E's the distribution side of their business. And so anything that crops up again related to that, PG&E continues to set things on fire and not upgrade their infrastructure, and therefore continue to set fire to things and so on. And so any developments that may come up there, we're out of the fire season now, so it's probably gonna be a little while until people get angry at PG&E again. But the fact that they keep turning our power off and call that fire safety, and that's all they're doing for fire safety is turning our power off, just isn't a long-term solution. So anything around that comes up would be useful to know about.
Yeah, well, I wanted to add that today, timely that you said that, I just sent this out today. California Insurance Commissioner, he announced that he did a moratorium prohibiting insurance companies from dropping 210,000 homeowners in areas affected by the year's wildfires. The moratorium requires insurers to retain these policyholders for a year and covers people who live near some of the largest wildfires in 2021. But it just came out today. I'll look to see where that covers, but I can share that as well. But yeah, very timely.
I got that email this morning too. And,
okay.
It doesn't cover us because we didn't
Okay.
actually burn. We were just next to something that burned. So, but we're having a conversation with Commissioner Lara's office already.
Okay, great. And I suspect that, again, that will legislation on that as well. There's never a shortage of bills. Don't worry.
Jeff?
Actually, yeah, just to follow up, Craig reminded me of a couple of things with PG&E. Obviously, when they were coming out of bankruptcy 2 years ago, there were some efforts maybe to rein them in, or even make them a public corporation, or some sort of co-op. That would be an interesting thing to look at if something goes sideways with them again, because it will. And then the other thing is, they have an initiative now where they're undergrounding. It'd be interesting to see efforts from the legislature. They were, sort of pushing them towards more undergrounding, because I think undergrounding wires would be a huge safety help for us and a lot of other communities. So it's just another topic of sort of, I think it's of interest to us in particular, but to a lot of communities in general.
Thank you. Okay, I had a few. Transportation, I think in the transportation sector, funding for roads is important to us because every year we have more liability there. more of our general fund has to go to fixing roads, so we're always looking for money there. The arduous permits that we have to do for stormwater and now for the recycling that take enormous amounts of time, which is really hard for small cities. If there's any legislation there to help the small cities with that. Let's see. Stormwater, I mean, in the water world, stormwater, money for stormwater capture systems for municipalities would be great for us to do one at our town center. And then I had a question about AB 377. It was a water quality bill. It's a 2-year bill now, right?
It is,
So
yeah.
it's
It
going-
did not move forward. So if they do want to move forward with the 2-year bill, that one, I think it didn't even get out of the first policy committee hearing. It had tons and tons of opposition. But if they do want to move it this year, it'll have to get through the first house by the end of January. The 2-year bills are on a very short timeline. So it's harder to move those in the second year, but definitely is doable. So.
And then ACA 1, which is financing affordable housing and public infrastructure. That's
Yeah.
also 2-year. And what
Yeah.
does it look like?
It's been brought back a number of times. I think it's just trying to rally up the votes to get it passed. I think everyone was a little bit weary of, even though it's not a tax at all, and it's just allowing locals to be able to do that. It's just the idea of it in an election year is always gives people some hesitancy, I think. So that's the only reservation, but I think that it's definitely going to be brought back. Aguiar Curry has made it a priority. It would just be trying to get those last votes to get it passed. So.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody?
And then I was just going to add on your first comment on the transportation. I know that's always after SB1 passed to provide road funding. It was obviously good and helpful and much needed, but nowhere near to help folks clear the backlog of funding that was needed. But since that passed, now the main focus hasn't been so much on road projects. It's more on active transportation and bike lanes and transit and rail, but that doesn't work for everybody because not everyone is in an area where that makes so, but that's just where the legislature's priorities are right now, particularly related to transportation too. But I've heard that from a number of local government folks, including CSAC and some of the associations, because they're hearing from members saying, we still have road problems, so yeah, but I hear you.
I agree with the legislature that the active transportation is what we should be doing. But again, you still have roads.
Yeah.
Those have to be fixed. So
totally.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions from council members? Well, thank you so much for coming, Audrey. This has been great. I've been on the council for 16 years, and this is the first time we have, as John said, that I've ever seen a lobbyist or that we've had this sort of vision. And I think we can thank our humble town manager, Jeremy Dennis, for coming up with this fantastic idea. And we're very happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, excited to work with all of you. And this was really helpful to understand some of the additional things that we should be looking out for in the legislature for bills and budget stuff. So we'll make sure we're flagging all those.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you.
Item number 10, this is another study session. This one is with the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District and the amazing Kellex Nelson. RCD is one of my absolute favorite organizations in the state. So I am so excited that Kellex is here tonight.
And if I can kick this off, Madam Mayor, as you all may recall, Kellex came to a previous meeting to sort of introduce what the RCD is. It's this great unknown agency that does so many wonderful things, and we're happy to be part of that education process for our own community. I'd asked Kellex and her colleague Sheena to come back tonight to further that conversation. So in some ways, similar to what we just did with with Audrey, hear a little bit more about what the RCD does, and then think a little bit about ways that we can start some partnerships as they've increased their sphere of influence in our community. So I'll stop there. Kellex and Sheena, take it away.
Thank you. And Mayor Derwin, thank you for those kind words. I am happy to share the floor here with somebody who I think is really amazing, and that's Sheena Sidhu. Sheena is actually going to share a couple of slides with you all tonight. Just a refresher. I know you hear from a lot of folks and you may or may not remember some of the details of what the RCD is or how we work. So Sheena will share some of that with you. She manages our forest health and fire resiliency program area. And then we could just kind of talk about the different myriad ways that the RCD might be able to partner with the town, including some of the things that you brought up aren't even in our slides, but we have a lot of experience around like stormwater harvesting, for example, and all sorts of things, water and natural resource related. So I'm just gonna hand it over to Sheena and take a back seat here.
Great. Thank you, Kellex, and thank you for the introduction to the council. So I'm going to just share my screen and then get the presentation up. And let me just make this a big screen. And I think I won't be able to see folks anymore, but I'm just gonna share this brief presentation. So again, thank you for having us again, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to share. Kellex has shared with the council before, so now it's my chance to share a little bit about what we're doing and figuring out those places for partnership. So let's start at what is the RCD. So we are the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. We like to say we help people help the land. This means that we help stakeholders of both private and public lands manage their natural resources. And we are boots on the ground because we're engaging directly with the community. The RCD itself is a special district within San Mateo County. Sometimes that can be a little bit confusing for folks since we're not a part of county government. However, we do have a relationship with the county. So they appoint our directors, and also the county is a partner in many of our projects that we do. Broadly, throughout California, there are about 100 RCDs and thousands more nationwide. The San Mateo County does have a claim to creating the first RCD in 1939. And how we operate is with an annual property tax base of $70,000. Everything else we do is funded through grants and agreements, and there's a lot of stuff that we do. So how do we work? We work in diverse ways that we help people do that work, that we help people help the land. This includes broadly technical assistance to landowners in jurisdiction about resource management. We also develop and implement a variety of projects, which I'll touch on in just a moment. We also do outreach, education. We engage in policy, and there's many other ways that we engage with the community. And this again is our boots on the ground. We work in the non-regulatory sphere. We're a non-regulatory agency. We always do our work in partnership, and we work where we are invited. Our work is accomplished again through a diverse tool set such as project development, implementation, collaborations, policy, etc. We do a lot. So what is it that we do? Here's a list of some of the focal areas that we focus on. A lot of our projects, in fact, overlap in these areas. Today, for our interest in our discussion, I'll focus on water, climate, and fire. That's probably the most relevant to the council, and I'll give a little brief overview of what that is. So for water, we focus on water conservation, water resource management, and addressing water quality. Regarding climate, our programs focus on both mitigating climate change and adapting to climate change. And then for fire, we reduce the risk of catastrophic fire, we improve forest health, and we help communities after a wildfire does occur. So this is some of these things are linking up to what the presentation from Audria as well. These are some of the same priorities that this sounds like the town does want to focus on. So to kick off our brainstorming session about partnership, I'll throw out a few photos of some work we've done to kind of help us visualize the possibilities of projects. So this is a project in the south coast of the county where we help to manage, we help the county and our private landowner address a catastrophic erosion event. So if you look at the image and that circle up there, that's a person, to just give you the scale of what this was. A pretty serious catastrophic erosion event. So this is something that we've worked on before. Another example is in Pescadero, where we leverage federal, state, and county funding to remediate the chronic flooding in the town. If you're familiar with the area, there's one primary road into town that was chronically flooded, and now that's basically a thing of the past now that we've worked on this project. And then related to fire resiliency in forest health, that's the program area that I particularly manage. We're currently addressing over 900 acres of forested land throughout the county, which is all on this large scale This is something that's long overdue in the county, so it's really exciting that we're able to do this. Our projects are reducing fuel loads, as well as the risk of wildfire, while simultaneously improving forest health. And our project sites are on multiple sites. This includes private lands, county parks, as well as state parks. And then many of the projects that we do within the forest health and fire resiliency work to address the communities that are within this wildland urban interface, the WUI. And this is an example of that. This is a neighborhood on the coast that's surrounded by flammable eucalyptus, so we're working with them on some projects. So just to conclude, there's a lot of opportunities for partnership. We're really excited to be here to talk to you about it and about these opportunities. They're adaptive to your priorities, which you've shared earlier today, this evening. These opportunities are intended to integrate diverse goals and values into environmental protection, such as public safety, economic security, equity, and social justice, which are important to all of us. These opportunities we're able to work across jurisdictions, which include private and public lands and multiple landowners simultaneously. And again, we're a neutral party that works with the constituents on a voluntary basis, again, in this non-regulatory sphere. So that's the overview I wanted to provide. I'll look to Kelly if she wanted to add anything else to that before we start our brainstorming session.
Thank you, Sheena. I actually didn't want to add anything, but for me, she slowed down in patches. Did that happen to others? Or was that just my connection? Okay, good.
Okay, good.
So if I can just take over for just a moment, since we're moving into the brainstorming session now, with that overview, we wanted to start to hear from council members with this brief education on areas that you'd like to see town staff focus some attention into developing those partnerships with RCD. It's a pretty impressive array of issue areas that the RCD works on. And I've had the pleasure of working with Kellex in the RCD for, I don't know, Kellex, what, 16, 17 years now, something like that, in my time at the county and with the state. And one of the things that it really strikes me about the RCD and what they do is that their entire organization is built on developing relationships and being the bridge between folks like me and those who are in the community who have remediation issues, but are concerned about how that may move forward. They don't want to get in trouble. They want to do the right thing. And RCD really focuses a lot of time on building trust and coming up with ways to move forward on those remediations that really need to happen. So you saw some of those examples. Some of the work that they do never gets in the press. We never hear about because they've developed great relationships and able to move forward. So I thought I'd just add that. It's really quite impressive. So turn it over to the mayor. We wanted to hear from each of you on those areas that you'd like us to focus on more. Thanks.
Okay, and another thing I wanted to add is they actually know which plants to leave and which plants to take out if you're working on your property for wildfire safety. And that is a rare skill. Okay, what council members, questions?
I'll throw out there while you guys are ruminating a little bit that the kinds of ways that we can partner with you range from Sheena said in her presentation that we have very diverse tools, and it ranges from being a thinking partner to being a project implementer to conducting outreach. So we partner often on like permitting strategy. Where do regulatory efficiencies exist? And we've helped create new permitting strategies for in the coastal zone in areas that are subject to the California Coastal Act, for example, and other programmatic approaches in the state. And sometimes we apply for grants on behalf of someone and manage the grant and implement the project for them. Or sometimes, like we've worked with the county to help roll out like a toilet rebate program to help constituents do water conservation. And then with county parks, we're addressing many hundreds of acres of forests. So it's at really different scales. We're helping the county right now conduct outreach for their South Coast sea level rise vulnerability analysis, which is really different from an implementation project. I'm kind of throwing out these sort of popcorn things so you kind of get the sense of it. I think if there was one way to describe the way we can work with you, it's very nimble. And so we're able to really, we are here in service to what your priorities are. Our constraints around those are that they need to be related to natural resources in some fashion. And also another big constraint is that our operating base, our property tax basis, we receive $70,000 a year. So everything that we do is from grants or agreements. So sometimes it can be a step before we bring in the funding to be able to do something.
Have you worked with little cities before?
Oh, Half Moon Bay isn't a little city, but we work with, Pescadero, the town of Pescadero, which isn't actually an incorporated town, but they function similarly. We work with PMAC, the Pescadero Municipal Advisory Council, a lot. We work a lot with small mutual water companies, Loma Mar Mutual Water Company, the Cuesta La Honda Guild, the Homeowners Association in La Honda. We work with them a lot. We help them with their reservoirs and their water supply and infrastructure. We've worked with larger cities. We work with Pacifica on water quality monitoring to help them comply with regulations. With the community of El Granada, which is not incorporated, but it's still like a town in many respects. We work with the Mid-Coast Community Council right now on a project to identify the opportunities to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire to the community because there are so many homes that are adjacent to very high fuel load, particularly eucalyptus. We also, in a lot of these communities, run a chipper program where homeowners can cut limbs and create defensible space around their home, and then we'll haul it, or we'll chip it and either haul the chips or give them back for use on site. So we do work with those kinds of areas, certainly.
So I'm just thinking in the past, we daylighted a creek and we created a vernal pool. Would those have been projects you could have worked with us on? Okay.
Yeah, we know creeks.
Yeah.
We know creeks and we know wetlands a lot. And as you said, we know botany. We have a lot of what I call ISTs. We have biologists and hydrologists and this IST and that IST. I myself am not an IST, but I know good ISTs when I see them. And so we have a lot of specialties between soil science and erosion control specialists to people who know hydrology and geomorphology, which is how a creek's going to move. So if you tinker with it over here, what's it going to do to the property over here, and those kinds of things.
So you could help our residents who are on creeks.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we have right now, I think we have probably 4 full-time equivalents that do that on our staff. Because in San Mateo County, I work a lot around the state, and in San Mateo County, there are batteries running low. Can somebody help me get a power cord? One of the things that you see here and that you don't see as much in some other parts of the state is that creeks are very incised. The banks are cut down and homes are very close to them. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. So from Pacifica down to like the Año Nuevo area, we see that with creeks. So we work a lot with like at reach length, where you have to work with multiple neighbors along a reach to accomplish something, because often it can't all be done on one property. You have to kind of work with the creek and the property owners. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, one of the things was occurred to me as the conversation was progressing was that on the Conservation Committee's medium-term agenda is some attention to our remaining large open space preserves in town. And what is also, this was prior to fire becoming a primary set of issues that we're working on. Fire is going to be another piece of that puzzle. I think there's a great opportunity to work closely with our Conservation Committee and thinking about what that may look like. The other area that popped in my head, and the kudos to, there's a number of a couple residents who participated in this this effort in one of our canyons in town, where private residents got together. They shared a canyon, a set of canyon properties, and worked on fire mitigation efforts. And it's an effort that we hope ultimately gets replicated in other places, where the town doesn't have a primary responsibility around the land. But that might be an area too where the RCD can be a resource to be made available to those folks.
Yeah, Sheena
Jeremy,
has.
can I jump in right
there?
there?
You go.
Yeah, Jeremy. So I'll jump in on that. That we did help. Those residents were so amazing in just taking a charge on working on their canyons and developing that report. We did come out. We had a group of 5 of RCD staff that were, so myself, our biologist, our wildland habitat enhancement staff member as well, come out, and we all looked around. The residents were pretty far along on the development of that at the time. So we were just like, yeah, you guys are doing good. You guys are on the right track. But that is something that we could have helped also at the beginning to, we can really make sure that the project's being done efficiently and effectively as well. And there's plenty of space that, for the reports. And then anything that comes out of that report that's developed into a project of management is also a place where we can help. Because again, those residents did a great job working on that.
We can, another place where we can engage around that is we're very effective typically at accessing public funds, grant programs. We're tracking all these grant programs. We're participating in the development of the grant programs, and we provide very early input on eligibility and all sorts of criteria for these grants to make sure that they're going to be right fitting for the communities that we serve. So we get involved in them before they're released as a grant solicitation typically. And so we can help with that. And we can also help leverage funds. So we know that, this grant program might leverage that grant program, or because we're working regionally, often we apply for things that are essentially like a block grant, because often funders are looking for something that has a regional or a collaborative approach. So we can bundle some of these projects with work that others are doing and make them much more competitive proposals. Because the state, it's easier for the state or for any grant manager to manage 4 large grants than 50 small grants. And they feel like there's efficiencies, there's economies of scale. So they really like that. Sheena's very involved in developing regional priorities and identifying projects and including those. And maybe Sheena, you can speak to some of your thinking about how this is a really great, if they wanted to be a guinea pig with us, and how you were thinking this might be a really great Firewise community.
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. I'm glad we have the opportunity to do that. So as Kelly mentioned, one of the projects that we do under my program is the Chipper program, and that is always very exciting. I know that Woodside Fire Protection District helps to manage the one that's in your town, but I always like it because it's a collective effort for each individual property owners at the same time are helping to remove that vegetation and get it cleared, and you're doing a community level fire resiliency and fire protection. And so I want to couple those efforts into something a little bit broader. So there's a program called the Firewise Community, but these can kind of be modeled in all different ways. And it's a collective way that the community can get together and do a number of projects or pursue funding. I'm thinking like home hardening could be one example of this, where everybody's working collectively to do to develop fire resiliency among across multiple residents and property owners as well. So because there is such a foundation and interest in this town as already, I was having the idea that maybe that this could be one of our guinea pig towns where we could try to see how this could work, and it could be a model that we could then replicate in other communities across the county. I think there's already so much energy and excitement and interest in it that this would be a great place to start.
Also, if you do become a Firewise community, it can really strategically position you to access other funds to be able to do some of your much needed projects. If you show that you're doing everything that you can, and then you want to address forested areas around you, it can make you really more competitive for those kinds of grants. One other thing completely unrelated to fire that I forgot to mention before is that we have worked over the years with a number of people in the town and in Woodside on who are equestrians who own horses, on things having to do with water quality, dust management, you know, manure composting, that sort of thing. We're also very involved in compost brokering in the county. So where people need to get rid of waste and where farms like the organic farms on the coast are looking for good quality sources of compost, we often help make those connections. So, so we've run workshops that definitely people from your town have participated in on how to, you know, how to set back from the creek, what's a reasonable distance, how to, you know, what gradient to have it in, what are practices that are good for the environment and good for your animals, especially in the winter, and getting them out of mud and, you know, appropriate drainage, that sort of thing.
Wow.
I had a question, which canyon were you referring to, Sheena?
I can actually.
I don't know the names of the canyons.
This is the one that's that kind of the top end of the where the Stanford Wedge project down at the
Next to
bottom,
Stanford
that
Wedge.
canyon there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the very top off of
Cervantes.
yeah, Pine
Okay.
Ridge, is that the name of the
Yeah.
street there?
Yeah. Okay. Questions, more questions?
I guess I have kind of two questions. So is the like operationally the way it would work is, you know, we would brainstorm a possible project and then you guys go out and find grant funding to support it, and then the project would happen, or like how does it all come together?
It really depends on where the opportunities are and what the needs are. So if it's a project implementation, and then we would, it depends who's the best implementer of it. You know, so like right now, Jeremy calls me and sometimes we just think things through together, or he'll say, well, what about this? And is this a concern? And we'll maybe give him some resources or talk to him, or that sort of thing. So there's that level of just ongoing, you know, engagement. If there's a project to be done, let me use as an example, county parks. With San Mateo County Parks, we've helped them with a number of creek crossings where their roads, they needed access roads and there were creek crossings. Actually, San Mateo County as well. We have like county roads, like Alpine Road, where it goes across the creek. We did a lot of work at that creek crossing. And so that was where we came to the county and asked them to do something. That road posed a barrier to migration for salmon. And we said, please, will you let us modify that crossing for you? And we applied for a grant, and they actually provided match funds. They were able to provide match funds that enabled us to access the grant. We managed the project with their oversight because it needed to, you know, meet their criteria. There are other times that we've tackled something where we're like, we'll do this part if you do that part, because the county had access to this particular fund pool, or they had a regulatory requirement that they had to invest in, like waste diversion. And so they said to us, what's the most meaningful way we can do this, that where we meet our regulatory requirement? Sometimes it's that somebody has funds and asks us to do a project for them. Sometimes we will talk together and say, this is a project that we want to do. We have a sense of when funding is going to be available. Do we want to go for that together? Who should be the applicant? Who makes sense to be the applicant? Should you be the applicant and we write the grant and you submit it? vice versa, or we just write it and do it for you, or you just do it and we're an advisor to you, or we just do the biological monitoring. I mean, there's just so many different ways that we can work together. That typically we like to just know what your priorities and your needs are and make sure that you know that we're here. And then the opportunities, if we keep talking, the opportunities will present themselves, and we'll just, be ready for the different paths that can take.
Thank you. I guess my other question was more specific, going back to you, Sheena, on your home hardening collaborative pilot project. Could you just elaborate a little bit on your thinking around that?
Sure. So for the idea with this Firewise community, it's a way to develop the community to be more fire resilient. So it would be a number of different, like, what I'm imagining is it'd be a number of different projects that the community could do. Home hardening was just one example, but it would be potentially like expanding the trooper program, doing something to help remove hazardous trees, or thinking of ways that removing vegetation at a large scale. Maybe there's, for example, like a shared canyon that folks want to like do some really massive vegetation management in the canyon collectively together. But it would be something, it'd be like a number of series of projects that we could do. And the keys to these projects is like identifying community leaders or communities, folks that are engaged in the projects. And like, if the community is already established around these shared goals and ideas, then we can go ahead and like pursue those projects versus like scrambling to be like, this is a good project for somebody to do somewhere. Like, we would have just like a more focused idea about it. And again, this is a little bit of that guinea pig idea where there's so much energy that I feel like there's so many opportunities in Portola Valley. So we can just develop from there and see how it could be most beneficial.
My understanding, Sheena, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that Firewise is essentially a certification that you apply for. So you have to do a number of things. You have to meet these criteria and apply for it, and then renew it annually. And then you receive this designation. It's like an honor, basically, for your community, and it positions you to be able to get additional resources.
Yeah.
And there's,
so
if you just Google it, there's a website that maybe we can drop something in the chat box that explains it in much more detail.
Yeah, I think so. It's either we could do Firewise, we could do something that's modeled around Firewise. For example, Marin County, I believe it's something very high, like 80% of the residents already live in Firewise communities. They're very organized around this idea. So it's something that's very successful, and that's where the idea originated for me. Will we use the exact same model, or we can make a model that fits the community? So that's what I'd like to explore.
The ranch is or was a Firewise community. I don't know if they still are.
I believe it still is.
Okay, are there other questions before we go to the public? Righty, Sharon. I think there's at least one hand up.
Rita Comas.
Hi there. Your organization looks fantastic. Just a point of clarification, is the town hiring them so that then the residents could reach out to them, or this is just letting us know that you exist?
You can reach out to us. You are our constituent. You can reach out to us at any point.
Okay. And so I guess the town, well, the information I've been able to research on you, I can share that. But as far as people being able to pay the organization, or if there are things in town that that we feel as residents that this organization could do to help the town, or we might have a neighbor that that needs some help and they don't understand what kind of help that they might need in this area. Is there a particular contact in the town for those type of issues, other than, like personal issues we would want to?
Yep, I'm going to put my email. I'm the executive director. I put my email in the chat, and they should contact me at any point. We'll also put our website in there, and if you look at the staff page, it says the programs and the staff. There might be a different staff person, but if you reach out to me, I will find the right staff person for you. And if we can't help you directly, we'll find somebody who can.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This town has some very unique issues. And, you know, the Conservation Committee is exceptional, but they always seem to be overtaxed, and also for the Public Works. And sometimes it's not clear on who's or what group takes care of an issue. But if we have some outside resources in this town, Jeremy, perhaps that would be you that would coordinate if we do notice something that perhaps they could help us with that is too much that we're unable to do it ourselves.
Yeah, you can always contact me, and we're building out some additional resource pages on our website, and the RCD is going to have a page as well to describe how residents can interact with them or contact the town or contact them directly. So we'll be putting that up in the next few weeks or so.
Thank you. There's some other organizations that I'm involved with, and you know, I will be reaching out to you personally. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more hands up in the community group. So I'll bring it back to the council. Thoughts? Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we have a lot of stuff in town that fits very well probably with what you guys do all the time. The two things that come to my mind first are, as was mentioned, the Conservation Committee's work on our land to figure out, you know, how should we maintain our large pieces of publicly owned land over time. And in a lot of cases, that means cleaning them up because they've been kind of just left alone for the most part for a while, and then ongoing maintenance. And our Conservation Committee has been very good at coming up with suggestions for that, but it takes a while. And as was just mentioned by Rita, you know, getting the mesh going between the plan and our Public Works Department to actually go out and do it and then maintain it and so on is something that probably we could use help with. And then the other one is actually item 13 on our agenda tonight. Not to jump ahead to that, but you know, we're talking about programs for private property wildfire mitigation, and we're I don't want to jump ahead to it, but it's sort of early stage brainstorming of what could we do to help private property owners do wildfire mitigation on their properties. And often doing individual properties isn't as interesting as doing, you know, whole neighborhoods or sets of adjoining properties. The more you could stop the fire burning on your own property, but if the thing 20 yards to your left is on fire, that doesn't help you a whole lot. I think as we have that discussion a little bit later, knowing that you guys are there as a resource is going to be useful.
You know, to the first example you gave of sort of what to do about your open spaces and thinking about ongoing management, maybe something comparable is work that we've done with the Granada Community Services District, formerly El Granada Sanitary District, and then they expanded to be able to provide parklands. Has worked with us where we've, you know, they have the Burnham Strip that's along Highway 1 across from Pillar Point Harbor. And, you know, it's not the most precious habitat, and they are still kind of figure out what they want to do in terms of recreation on that. So we were, you know, a partner with them and thinking through what could they do that is low intensity, reasonable cost, that doesn't limit future uses of the property, but manages it the best way for habitat, recognizing that it's never going to be pristine habitat. You know, like what's the balancing act that kind of makes sense for your values and the resources that you have, that's something that we can help think about sometimes.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Someone else raising a hand. Jeff.
I mean, you know, the most obvious things are obviously just this. Marianne, you talked about sort of knowing what to remove on particularly on a steep slope property in terms of how to balance erosion safety with fire fuel removal. I can think of 3 constituencies in town that we're sort of trying to work with, or talked about working with, or plan to work with, and one is obviously Mid-Penn is our open space, and maybe you already work with them. I'm curious about that. The other is we have some large private property holders that we have sort of are targeted as possible partners that we'd like to work with in terms of clearing off their land. And the third would be the fire district, just to help them. I'm sure if they haven't already, I'm sure they could use guidance on terms of like helping people with their vegetation removal for that very question of just erosion safe fuel removals. So those are, I mean, I feel like feel like there's other more creative things we could be doing. It's just the fire thing is the top of my mind and probably a lot of people's minds, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Thanks, Jeff. John?
Yeah, I think all the items that Craig and Jeff mentioned make sense. I do get the feeling that this is one of those situations where the project is going to present itself and then we'll say, and here's who we need to talk to. You know, it's going to, those kinds of things are going to crop up later on. I think the best part about this tonight is knowing you're there and knowing what the types of things you can do. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's anyone from the Conservation Committee on the call tonight, but they would be thrilled to have your help in certain cases. And I know that, for instance, cleaning up the frog pond and trying to figure out how to deal with the invasive harding grass, and I'm sure that you guys could give them some great tips, and maybe just somebody from your organization coming up to one of their meetings, showing up and talking to them about that would be helpful. But I can see probably things cropping up, bigger projects cropping up all in the future, just out of the blue. So thank you so much for being there.
Is there anything else you would like to say, Sarah? Oh, mute.
I don't really have a lot to add. I was thinking of the frog pond and the Conservation Committee as well, actually, John. I just think it's great that you guys are here. Obviously, it seems like there's a lot of potential that you guys might be a good, thus far, untapped resource / partnership for us. And I also just love the fact that you guys seem to know the town really well. So it'll just make, working together really collaboratively. So I have a feeling we'll all put our thinking caps on and, figure out, how to have a productive next step working on a variety of things with you guys. So thank you.
I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I would actually, though, like to dive into a project. I love Sheena's enthusiasm for the guinea pig idea. I would just like to really get going on something. Yeah, you're there, you're fantastic. There's lots we can do, but I'd like to nail a project sooner than later. I would like to do some water projects. I understand we've got to first focus on fire, but we have a long history of respecting our creeks. It used to be when I first got on the council, once a year, Leslie, and I think it was at the time, George and Tom, we and staff and others would all walk the creeks, and check the health. And we don't have time to do that anymore. So I would love to get back to that kind of thing and water, some sort of major stormwater capture project. But to begin with, the guinea pig idea. So that's where I'm at. Is that enough to get going, Jeremy, with Calyx?
I think that'll keep us busy.
Can I add one thing? We talked with, so Hillsborough is also a Firewise community, the whole town, I believe, or most of it. And we talked to them a while ago. I can't remember who else was on. I know Jeremy and I were on that meeting, but we talked to them a little bit about just the required. Were you on that one, Marianne? Okay, because they were. I mean, we were. I think at the time we were thinking, is this something the Portola Valley should consider? And we never really moved forward with it. But it's something. I mean, that's expanding Firewise. Maybe it's a neighborhood at a time. Maybe it's not the whole town, but it would be interesting to reconsider that idea of sort of making other parts of town Firewise communities or neighborhoods or whatever is available at somewhere between the ranch and the full town.
Yep, we've started to do some legwork on that, doing some homework on that, and it is part of like we're starting to develop that foundation. And yeah, now it's like put the pieces together and start trying it.
Okay.
May I just ask, recognizing that you don't want to do everything at once, it's too much. Nonetheless, I want to say, would you believe we have a ponds program And it's actually kind of important to get in the queue now. So if we, because it can take a while to get the funding for the permits. If it's a California red-legged frog pond, and you have to get biological opinions from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, et cetera, it would be good if I could connect my ponds folks with someone and find out what your need is and start getting that in the queue, because it'll take a while to get going.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd
Okay.
like to just say compost brokering is an absolutely new concept to me. I'm glad you introduced us to that tonight.
And I think we have, at least we have a couple of questions in the audience, I believe. Let me look.
No hands raised right now, Marianne.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I think we probably could use a program like that. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sheena and Kellex.
Thank you.
Once again, I so admire your work. You are such an amazing and unique little body, and you get so much done. I will let you go back to your sleepover, Kellex. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, guys.
The next item on our agenda is item number 11, recommendation by our town attorney, first reading of the ordinance, adding uniform administrative citation process to the Portola Valley Municipal Code. Cara.
Thank you. So I have to apologize in advance. This matter is not going to be nearly as interesting as the previous two study sessions, but it's a necessary element. So this is an introduction to the ordinance in front of you, adopting an administrative penalty process. Let me get the. So we're just going to talk about the need for the ordinance, the staff's approach to code enforcement, then go over the ordinance provisions, and then talk about next steps. So as you will recall, on January 8th, 2020, the council conducted a study session on code enforcement in general, and the council talked about the different types of code enforcement approaches that we have had in the town. There was certainly mixed reactions, both from the council and from the residents, on whether, as sort of a philosophical matter, the council, some council members liked the neighbor to neighbor code enforcement approach, and liked a light touch to code enforcement. Other perspectives involved a more targeted approach to code enforcement, and recognized that there were some situations in town that did require more attention. Regardless of the perspective on code enforcement, the shift from general code enforcement, which used to be really litigation driven or criminal enforcement, now the state of the art is through an administrative penalty and citation process. This allows a much more efficient and quick resolution of code enforcement matters, rather than having to go to a judge and ask for an injunction, or to bring a misdemeanor action against a violator. So currently, we do not have a uniform process for code for administrative penalties and citations in our code. And we really, at this point, do need to adopt a uniform system if we want to use the penalty process as a way to address code enforcement. What we have also been realizing is that with SB 1383, we are now going to be required to actually impose penalties through a local process, and without a code enforcement process in place, it's going to be difficult to do that. So in terms of our general approach to this ordinance, what we the way we approached it is that this will be a phased approach. We want to continue to foster neighbor-to-neighbor resolution. We want to really encourage staff to continue to meet with residents in order to gain voluntary compliance. That is always the end goal of code enforcement. It's really not intended to be punitive. It's intended to gain compliance. And so as a result, the penalties associated with this proposed ordinance would only be imposed as a last resort. Also, the penalties are not intended to be exclusive. We will still have all of our normal tools regarding code enforcement, but as I've mentioned, those tools are not nearly as effective as the administrative citation process. So the process that is set forth in the proposed ordinance is a multi-step approach. The first step in this process would be for staff to make an informal contact with the violator and try to resolve the matter. Sometimes it can be as simple as just informing the violator what the local municipal code provision is, and the property owner will sometimes comply, provided they know what the actual governing law is. The second step, if compliance is not achieved at that level, would be to provide a written notice of violation and then provide a reasonable time to correct the violation. If the violation is not corrected within that time period, then the third step would be to issue a citation and a penalty. The fourth step would be that if the violator contested the penalty or the actual violation, then they would have the ability to appeal. The way the appeal process works is that the violator actually deposits the fine amount before the hearing starts. And so the town has the fine in hand before the hearing is actually conducted. The hearing is conducted by a neutral hearing officer. And then finally, the hearing officer makes a decision. If the hearing officer decides in favor of the appellant or the code violator, then the town will return the deposit. On the other hand, if the hearing officer decides in favor of the town, then the appellant or the violator has the ability to file a legal action against the town. That's the next step in the process. In terms of the penalty amounts, these penalties are largely determined by state law. The first offense is $100. The second offense is $200, and the third and additional offense is $500. These amounts appear to be low, but remember that each violation is subject to another penalty, and so the daily fines can add up very quickly. The council also has the ability to adjust these amounts by a resolution. At this point, we're not recommending that any of the amounts be adjusted, that the default amounts just go into place, and that we monitor the situation to see how those are going. Finally, there is a hardship provision in the ordinance, and that is a requirement of state law. In terms of next steps, we did want to let you know that we have some additional work to do. We will be updating our templates in terms of code enforcement citations. We'll be creating those. We will also need to do some cleanup down the line in our municipal code. There are other various provisions dealing with penalties, and so we'll want to eliminate those so that all violations will be under this uniform process. And then finally, we will have to monitor to see if there are certain offenses that would warrant lesser fines. And if that is the case, we would bring those forward by a separate resolution. And with that, happy to answer any questions. Our recommendation is to conduct the first reading on this ordinance. And then we would bring it back at the next meeting for final adoption.
Okay. Council members, do you have questions? Craig.
Yeah, so you mentioned that state law kind of limits the maximum penalties, and that's what you've encoded into here. What happens when you have compound offenses? So let's say somebody puts up an illegal sign with illegal lighting on the illegal sign. Is that 2 offenses with a double fine, or 2 offenses with 1 maximum fine, or only 1 offense? Or how does that work? We could, because otherwise we could potentially, if we wanted to increase the fine somewhere, craft, rules where you're violating multiple things at a time.
Correct. No, it is the maximum amount per municipal code provision. So in your situation, there would be 2 violations, and then so there would be 2 different fines. Generally, code enforcement officers have some discretion on how to cite that. Some will just cite 1 of them, and some will cite multiple.
Thanks.
Okay, other questions? All righty, are there any questions in the public sphere?
Rita Gomez.
Yeah, just a quick question. Who would implement these things? Like if things happen currently on the weekends or holidays, there doesn't seem to be a process unless you want to like out your neighbor on PV Connect or something. But there's no people to administer this, and so would we be hiring the level of truant officers to go and give tickets to our neighbors, or is there a way that another step before this that we could perhaps do some type of mitigation with someone in the town to talk to the neighbor that doesn't want to be talked to before it reaches that state? No, just a question. Thanks.
Jeremy, I see your hand up. Did you want to answer this?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to the question. This doesn't, we're not making any recommendations as it relates to having additional human resources available on the weekends for code violation issues. Would also note that PV Connect, a code violation input is anonymous, so that's the case with phone calls to us as well. So there's no need to put in your information on those issues because we know that they can be sensitive. I forgot my second point. It'll come to me in a moment, but just wanted to address that. Thanks.
So I would also tag on to that with respect to weekend violations, of course, as a community, we do want to encourage, neighbor to neighbor resolution, if that is possible. But even if a violation occurs outside of the presence of a code enforcement officer, the officer would still, if a complaint is received, if it comes in anonymously or otherwise, the code enforcement officer would investigate it and would still be able to issue a citation if they found that the violation had in fact occurred.
I would also note that what we're proposing tonight doesn't change the process that we have in place, which is engagement, education, speaking to folks. Initially, they may not even be aware that there was a code violation. This is really steps at the very end of a process. So no changes to our normal soft touch and congenial approach.
Okay, Sharon, is there another question?
Caroline Vertonghen.
Caroline?
Good evening, Mayor Derwin. Thank you very much for taking my comments. I appreciate that Council Silver really understands that we're a community and that we usually resolve our issues by talking to our neighbors. The problem that we have is that we have an increasing number of consultants that seem to direct, to make decisions and staff making decisions, and there is no due process if there's shortcomings there. So we used to have Mr. Keith Wiener, who was appointed by town council or by staff as our code enforcer, and I just looked it up and I just discovered that he's no longer on the list of staff. Could you please comment on that? Thank you.
Jeremy, would you like to comment on that?
I'm not sure what my comment would be other than to say that
Keith.
Yeah, Keith hasn't worked for the town in 2.5 years.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments from our community members?
There are no additional hands raised.
Okay, taking it back to the council. Comments, thoughts, we will be asked to make a motion introducing and waiving the first reading of the ordinance. Craig.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. It's a missing tool that we rarely would have had to use in the past, but we've had circumstances where people are just persistently violating our code, and even after neighbors talk to them or we talk to them or we encourage them or we ask really extra super nicely, they just still won't do what they're supposed to do, and they just don't care. And so having a system in place whereby we can actually find them and process to do that, I think to encourage them to do what they're supposed to do under the law when they just won't change what they're doing is appropriate, unfortunately.
John.
Yeah, I agree with Craig. I'm afraid we're at that point. Hopefully we'll be able to continue our soft touch, as it's put, and in reaching out to people. And I've done a lot of reaching out over the last year on leaf blowers. I've talked to a lot of gardeners and a lot of neighbors, and finally I've started putting them into a PV Connect because they keep on going. So it's becoming an increasingly becoming a problem.
Anybody else?
I'll just add, agree. Hopefully, it's an important tool to have, and hopefully just one of last resort. And obviously also seems required, given, as was mentioned, the waste management issues that we're going to be dealing with all the new things that we need to be working on that Brandy explained at the last meeting. So.
Okay, and Jeff, do you agree?
I agree, and I will move to introduce and waive reading of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second. No.
Right. Any more discussion? Roll call, please. Sharon?
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Warnickoff,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Okay, thanks for all your work on that, Cara. It wasn't that boring. Item number 12 is a recommendation from the town manager that the town become a member of the Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance. Jeremy?
Thank you. Mayor Derwin, members of the council. Sharon, if you would promote John Ford, who's the executive director of commute.org, is here tonight too. He can answer any questions that you might have. Just very briefly, I think the staff report covers the item well. Mayor Derwin received a request from John Ford at commute.org to join the organization. We're one of the few remaining San Mateo County cities not part of the Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance. I'm going to stop there. John, I don't know if you want to add anything about your organization, but I wanted to keep it short and sweet tonight.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mayor Derwin and members of the council. I'm John Ford, Executive Director at commute.org, otherwise known as the Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance. I've been here for about 10 years, and the Alliance has been in existence for about 21 years as it's currently formed. Back in 2005 was the last time that we expanded our membership, and we really appreciate your council and your town's patience. About 3 years ago, we received an interest from your town to join, and we kind of tried to get fits and starts. We got it going eventually. It took us a little while, but we're now here, and our board and the rest of our members are extremely excited about having the potential to join 3 new members, which would be the town of Portola Valley, town of Woodside, and the city of Menlo Park, which would complete the alliance and would bring us to 21 total members. The county of San Mateo is a member, as are currently 17 other cities and towns. The process for joining is straightforward and simple. I've laid it out. It's a matter of adopting a resolution and signing the new JPA agreement. It's something that so far 14 of the 18 current members have ratified this change. And once all 18 get it done, and then the new members will be formally invited to participate. Well, you're already formally invited. Once you adopt it, then once we get the other 3 or 4 stragglers through the process, it will become formal for you to become a member if that's what you choose to do as a council. I've met many of you at different committees and boards that you serve on, but I don't know all of you, and we don't know your town as well as we should. I think this will be a good opportunity for us to make sure that we have that connection and connect you to the rest of the community as well. I think I heard that in one of your earlier comments this evening about an opportunity to make sure you stay connected as Portola Valley to the rest of the county. The other thing that we offer is that connection to the rest of the region. We are the TDM agency for San Mateo County, but we work with all of our partners in all of the surrounding counties to make sure that your residents have opportunities to make sure that they're connected to all the best commute options and commute alternatives if they're working in San Mateo County or any of our neighboring counties. And conversely, with people that might be coming to your city or town for employment purposes. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And And I would really love to be able to come back and do a full presentation on who we are and what we do, should you choose to do that. Fortunately, I wouldn't be on the same agenda as RCD. They're a pretty tough act to follow. Ours is about commuting. I mean, I might throw some pictures of some snakes and frogs and things like that into our presentation just to make it better. But unfortunately, it's mostly cars, but we are all about active transportation as well. So I think there's a nexus between what they're doing and what we're doing as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John. John does many presentations at CCAG, and I always find your PowerPoints of interest.
Thank you.
I have one question. Will there be a hazing ritual for the new member?
No, we promise not. Well, maybe for one of the member cities that's coming in, but not for you. No, definitely not.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions? Craig?
Yeah, I have a question that's probably more for Cara. What is the effect of us entering into this JPA agreement? As I understand it, we're delegating some of our powers as some of our council powers to the JPA. And as I read the agreement, included in that is the power to make and enter into contracts to incur debts, liabilities, and obligations, and a variety of other similar things. So does that mean that when we enter into this JPA, the JPA can then enter into a contract and incur liabilities on our behalf that we are then responsible for? And in particular, I'm thinking, if we're one of 21 and a tiny, one of the smallest of the 21, if the JPA incurs large liabilities, how does that come back to us as a town under this JPA? Could you explain that a little, please, Cara?
So I may defer to John on some of that. I had a similar question when I looked at the JPA. The town is not fiscally responsible for any of the activities. As I understand it, there is a separate funding source for all of the JPA's activities. But John, if you could explain that a bit more, that would be great.
Sure. So we are a traditional JPA, so there is that shared responsibility for both governance and fiscal responsibility as it relates to the programs that are under the umbrella of the JPA. All of our funding is similar to what was described earlier from another group, grant funding for the most part, annual grant funding. We don't enter into long-term agreements or long-term liability issues. We have AB 1912 was the only thing that I think is, and that's what kind of held us back from 2018. So AB 1912 was a law. I wish Audrey was here. She probably remembers it fondly from back when it was passed. And that was the one that says that if you have CalPERS pension liability that needs to be spread across the JPA members upon the dissolution of a JPA, how would that be shared? And that law said that, yes, the members would be responsible, and they either can choose how to do that dissolution themselves, or they can allow CalPERS to make that decision on their behalf. We brought it to our board, and they decided to punt. They decided that rather than try to decide how they would actually figure out how to make that dissolution, we presented lots of different alternatives to them. And they decided that more than likely it would end up coming down to some type of population-based distribution across the 21 members, should it be that, or 18 at the time. And while it hasn't been forever put away, they've just decided that the likelihood of that was so low, and that they felt comfortable that CalPERS would do the right thing if it happened to share that responsibility across the 21. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of we are a JPA, so.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but so I mean, one of the terms in here is that in a dissolution, you talk about how to split up the assets, which is actually equally amongst the participants. So we'd benefit from that if
Correct.
there's a positive balance in the bank.
Correct.
But it doesn't talk about liabilities. And so if there was a dissolution of the agency, or you got into some situation where everything went really badly and there were huge liabilities and no money to pay for it, even in the short term, it doesn't talk in here about what that would mean for us. And without a term in there to say it will be done by population, or it will be done based on, you know, what jurisdiction it was that the liability was incurred in. So if it's a freeway project, you know, on 101, you know, it's not on us. If it's fixing up a road up here, maybe it's on us and not on anybody else. I don't really have a good understanding of what our liability is there. And it could be that we're liable for, you know, an equal share of what could be millions and millions of dollars. What's your annual budget?
4.3 million.
Okay, so it could be 500,000-ish.
Yeah.
No.
Right. And
250,000-ish.
Yeah. And
if you had no revenue and a year's worth of liabilities, it's all saved up.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty certain our board wouldn't allow that to happen. But yes. But the nice thing is we do have a positive reserve balance. Our most recent financial statement, net of all pension liability, is about $650,000 net positive balance.
We had the similar question come up back when we joined Peninsula Clean Energy, which is a much larger JPA.
And that's why I remember it, because I spent a lot of time over those provisions with that JPA agreement.
I mean, I don't remember how anymore. It's been a long time since I thought about it, but we resolved it to everyone's satisfaction. And it was, I mean, the JPA in some way insulated the individual member cities from any liability from the organization. I don't remember if that's a standard part of the JPA law itself, or if it was something written into that contract. I was just trying to remember. Cara, I don't remember, were you involved in that, or was Lee still doing our stuff at that time?
Yeah, I was not involved in that particular JPA. This issue comes up with JPAs very frequently.
Yeah.
Sorry if I might, Cara. So I was involved with that, Jeff. I spent a lot of time with Lee and the county attorneys on it in terms of drafting it, because the original draft had none of these protections, especially for small towns in it. So we put a lot of that stuff in. I think this PCE was a much more important thing because of the size and the term of the liabilities that you were taking on potentially over the life of PCE. There are, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts for 20 years worth of energy delivery and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it was a much more important question there. Here, I think with the smaller annual budget and the fact that, you know, there's a history of operations and so on, it's a little bit less of an issue. It struck me as a little odd that the documents had, you know, what to do with the assets when you dissolve the thing, but not what to do with the liabilities.
Yeah. No, I believe it is silent on that, and I think it has been since its original formation.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Okay, are there any questions from the community?
Caroline Versongen.
Oh, thank you very much, Council Member Hughes, or Vice Mayor Hughes. I appreciate your question. It's very important. Is there anybody who can actually give us a summary of all the GPAs that we have? I know we have a GPA with the library, PCE. We have a number of other GPAs. Is anybody present tonight who can give us a summary of all the of all these what is it called, JPAs?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Through the chair, Caroline, if you want to drop me an email tomorrow, just remind me, I can send you a list of all of them. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I see no additional hands raised.
I will bring it back to the council. Thoughts about, we are being asked to become a member of commute.org. And if we do choose to do so, we will approve the resolution, authorize me to sign the Second Amendment to the JPA, and then assign a council member to serve as the rep. Thoughts?
Do we need to approve the first two before we discuss who the rep's going to be?
I don't know that I mean, are you worried that no one will sign up to be rep?
Oh, no, I just was, trying to focus on the protocol.
Well, I can tell you, since I pushed this idea 3 years ago, I would be happy to be the rep.
Great.
Well, not to be too dismissive of the liability concerns, I actually think this is a really great step for us to take. Reducing, the county has adopted a new goal for greenhouse gas to be greenhouse gas neutral by 2035. We've identified vehicle miles traveled as an important target for reaching that goal. This is a really important sort of an area and initiative for us. So I would be comfortable moving forward.
Okay.
I
Sean,
would as well. Yeah, I think it's an important step to take. I like the idea. I'm sure we can resolve the liability issue.
okay, are there other thoughts, or would someone like to, Craig?
Yeah, I think I'm generally comfortable with the liability issue, given the board as being the 20 other or 19 other towns and cities in the county, and the county itself as being reasonably good supervisors of the financial situation, along with John's own work, of course, in that regard. I'd be ready to approve this, but I would like to, John, if you could see a copy, if you have them, of your latest audited financials. If you've got a balance sheet and operating expenses and all that stuff, that'd be useful to see, to understand what we're getting into here.
Okay, so he could get that.
But
too.
I'm ready to approve that without having seen those ahead of time.
Okay, Sarah, did you have anything to say, or would someone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion approving the enabling resolution, if that's a good enough motion.
All right.
Second.
All right, discussion. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Warnickoff,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. Now, Cara, it says authorize the mayor to sign the Second Amendment. Yeah. Is that, do we need a motion for that too? Mute. You're mute. Cara, mute.
Yes, you'll need to adopt a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the document.
All right, do I have a motion?
I would make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the Second Amendment to the Alliance's Joint Powers Authority and to appoint her to be the town's representative on the Alliance's board of directors.
Is there-
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Warnickoff,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hughes,
Aye.
Mayor Derwin.
Aye. So when does this go into effect?
Most likely it will be after our board meeting we meet on, I think, November the 18th. And that's when we will be ratifying the receipt of all of them. So our next board meeting would be in February.
Okay, then.
And we will make sure that we send you the full certification of all of the JPA documents, as well as the audited financial statements and so forth, just post haste. And I can't thank you enough. I'm so excited. You're the first new member in 16 years, and it's really, really amazing. And we really look forward to working with you.
Thanks, John. I look forward to it too.
Thank you.
Righty, and then to the last item on the regular agenda, colleagues memo from Council Member Wernicott, town support for private property wildfire mitigation. Are you going, Sarah, you're going to handle this one, correct?
Sure. Do you guys want me to read this, or do you want me to, what would be the typical?
You could just give us the.
Yeah, so, okay. So yeah, I think right before I joined the council, there was discussion about a variety of recommendations from what was at the time the ad hoc wildfire committee, one of which was a fund for home hardening. And I've been thinking a lot about this kind of over the last couple months, and was wondering if it might be a good time to kind of take a second look at that just kind of dust it off and take a second look at it, and perhaps in a different context, not necessarily as narrow as home hardening, but in a broader context, just for wildfire mitigation and all the variety of different things that people can do on their private properties. And so my colleague's memo and discussion tonight is kind of intentionally broad because I don't want to be too prescriptive about it. I just wanted to kind of take an opportunity to rethink this. We did reach out, thank you, Jeremy, to Woodside to get some data on, what's been going on with their program over the last 10 years. You can read it in the report there. But they've, granted and matching funds, I think about $1.8 million over the last 10 years. And I guess the way I think about this is really, obviously, a couple $1,000s on so many of the lots here really doesn't go a long way. But I think about this as, my intent is really to use this, if we were to move forward with something like this, more as of a tool to raise awareness and educate and kind of be a catalyst for people to rethink or think for the first time about the different strategies they might be able to take on their own properties, whether it be, again, more broad, not just home hardening, vegetation management, defensible space, and all of that. We all know that there's no silver bullet, one size fits all approach, and different properties in different neighborhoods need different, have different priorities, I guess I would say. And so that's just my thought. And I just also thought it would be interesting to think about ways to kind of have a private public funding approach to this. I have, that obviously makes things complex, but I think it would be nice, given we all know that this is such a priority for our town, it would be a way for us to kind of take a unified approach, both from, town funding as well as private funding. And I don't know what's possible there. And I'm open to thinking about a variety of ways to do it and explore that. And I guess kind of in closing, this obviously would need some detailed thinking, and my suggestion would be to propose it back to the wildfire committee to rethink both the scope and the how, and possible funding approaches, although funding approaches might make more sense within on the staff side or on the council side. So that is, in a nutshell, my thought.
All righty. Questions from the council? Jeff.
Thanks. Sarah, is the Woodside program like an actual straight match? Like if you spend $6,000 on your your property? Do they just pay you that much, or do you have to spend other, like, is there some other sort of criteria you have to meet?
Yeah, they have, and I'm not suggesting necessarily at all that we copy theirs. You know, there's can be a starting point and something to look at, but my understanding what they do is it's expansive of both the dispensable space and home hardening. It's a maximum of 3,000.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, it's pretty specific, the way the program is designed right now. It's there's 3 types of projects that the program will support: replacement of a wood shake roof with a non-wood shake roof, installation of non-combustible ember-resistant vents or chimney spark arresters, and installation of approved seismic gas shut-off device or valve that will shut off gas automatically in an earthquake.
So again, I'm definitely not suggesting that my proposal isn't to just copy theirs. It's just to kind of reassess this in a more broad sense.
Sure. Okay. That's all I have. That's the only question I have for now. We'll come back for discussion.
Okay, other questions?
And I also just want to add, I know there's been a lot of community members and people on the wildfire committee that have been looking into this. So this is not a novel idea. I realize that. And so would obviously want to work very closely with them on it.
Yeah, the community members have been asking about this for quite a few years. Are there any other questions, or should I check with Sharon to see if there are any questions in the community?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Right. Okay, how about some comments from my colleagues? Okay, Craig, you can go first.
Oh.
Jeff already got.
Yeah, so after reading your memo and sort of reflecting on it and thinking back to why we didn't adopt the recommendation when it came from the wildfire committee. Well, there were a number of reasons, but my thinking on it, and this year is different from 2019. We've learned more in the last 2 years about wildfire. My thoughts on this are really, I think the goal here of any program would be behavior modification, getting people to improve the fire safety of their property that they otherwise wouldn't do absent the program. And so I think, Sarah, you touched on a couple issues that are important. I think education is an important piece, and I think we're doing a reasonable job of that, but we could probably do it better, especially if we put some money behind it and did mailers and signs at town center or whatever other mechanisms we have for improving education, bringing in paid speakers maybe to talk about stuff. I think though also when I think of behavior modification, and I do this all the time at work when you're trying to get people to do things with your software that they're not figuring out how to do, what you really want to target your resources towards is lowering whatever the barriers are. So first thing you have to do is figure out, why are people not doing this? And in Portola Valley, my guess is that money is part of it, but that a much bigger part of it is probably, it's not really the right word, but what I'd call the hassle and the time involved in people doing this, figuring out, okay, where do I even start? Who do I talk to do this work? What kind of work do I need to do? How do I know whether it's more important to replace my wood shake roof or cut down the eucalyptus trees? And really, as a homeowner, I think about my own property and what I've done for fire management on this property. It's just really hard to know where to even start. And $3,000 isn't going to make that big of a difference, because I'm talking about protecting my, multi-million-dollar house value. So I'm going to be willing to spend $3,000 out of pocket if it makes sense to do it. But I don't know what to spend the $3,000 on. I don't even know who to go talk to ask about educating me about what to spend the $3,000 on. I know, okay, yeah, I've got some trees that maybe I want to cut down, but I don't know if that's the most important thing. And so what I think, if we were going to do a program that we were going to put money behind to help property owners do wildfire mitigation, I think providing some turnkey solution or something where we send over from somebody from RCD or Woodside Fire or one of each or whatever it is to their house to do an assessment for that specific property, to say, here are the top 5 things you should do. Here's roughly how much each one would cost. And here are some contractors who'll do each one for you, to get over that hassle hurdle, the difficulty of knowing where to start and what you need to do. And maybe, throw in a couple $1,000s to actually get started on the work. But to me, the bigger barrier and the bigger obstacle to get people to do wildfire mitigation on their properties is not even knowing what to do up front. So the more we can make that easier and target whatever funding we put behind it to that, I think the more successful this would be.
I think that's a great point. And I'm almost certain, and I'm trying to pull it up right now, that's exactly what Woodside Fire does. It starts basically, if I pull this up right here, is Woodside Fire comes, step 1 is in the application process, is you obtain an application and contact Woodside Fire Protection District to schedule defensible space home hardening assessment. And so that is done as step 1, and I think it's gratis. Go ahead, Jeff. Oh, sorry. I guess I'm not allowed to do that.
No, you can. You can say, well, actually, you could say through the chair, but you can't
Chair.
really say
Through the chair.
and then call on somebody. So I'm wrong.
Speak.
Yeah.
Okay,
Jeff, I'm sorry.
so
I was
we
writing-
actually have been talking about this at the fire committee.
Right.
In fact, I just sat down with the home hardening subcommittee 2 weeks ago and talked about basically taking that model for the Upper Canyon that we were talking about earlier and trying to basically extend it to this sort of program in a few neighborhoods. Basically just starting block by block, maybe through neighborhood watch captains, and do what Craig's talking about, which is literally just get a bunch of neighbors together, for sort of like within a limited time period, like within a 2-week period. And somebody, it could be Woodside Fire. We haven't quite gotten to talking to them about it directly yet, but Woodside Fire, some other consultant doing what Craig you're suggesting, which is just literally go property to property and just try to get kind of a combination of like limited time availability and neighbor to neighbor contact, and maybe some neighborhood watch captain who's fairly active in their block to just spur more adoption of these things. So that point's well taken. Regarding the funding part of it, in the past, I have been kind of resistant to that, partly just because it felt like matching someone's, paying half of someone's $6,000 investment property by property felt like spending a relatively large amount of money on what I thought was a smaller impact. In thinking about this again, though, I mean, I'm if a $2,000 or $3,000 investment were to spur somebody into making like a $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 cleanup on their property, that's a pretty big multiplier. I mean, to me, that's a different proposition. But I think we'd have to structure the program in a way that sort of have some sort of criteria around it, so that we get sort of like, I don't want somebody to do 5% of their fire mitigation, $6,000 worth of stuff, and then pay them half of that and get something, make each property 5% safer. So, if we were to identify large projects, have a project defined by say the fire marshal, Woodside Fire District, and then you get the, your bonus from us when you complete that whole project. Yeah, you're going to spend a lot more money than what we're giving you, but we've discovered that people, like that little, even a relatively small portion of that as a rebate actually does spur some adoption. So, I think possibly combined with marketing and with some publicity and maybe neighbor to neighbor contact, it could have a difference. So I'm more open to it than I've been in the past, but I think I'd want to be very thoughtful about how we applied it, so that we actually, I really just want to get the most effect we can get from the money, limited money that we have. The committee also talked a little bit about fundraising previously. And so, some combination of private donations, and we talked about a bond. That would be a very difficult thing. I think it would be pretty difficult to put that together. So it's a thought they had. we could consider going forward. But I'm more open to it than I've been in the past. I'll put it that way. But again, I'd like to see some really careful, thoughtful criteria around the program if we do something like this.
Jeremy, did you want to speak to something? Mute. You're mute.
Sorry about that. Through the chair, wanted to note that the Woodside Fire Protection District has a pretty robust program. They send a letter every year to every resident in the district around defensible space issues. And I think to the points that multiple council members have made, people make decisions on whether or not to reach out to the fire marshal to take advantage of the programs that they have available there. But I just wanted to point that out, and I should also note that I've requested that the district start producing an annual report on the work that's been done, the number of properties, what kind of work has happened, so we could get a better sense of the effectiveness of their suite of programs. Because in the end, we got to come up with as many ways as possible to encourage people to do this. So I just wanted to point that out. I want them to get the credit where credit's due. Thanks.
Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Jeff's point about how to pay for it if we were to do something like this. I think we can find money in the budget if we need to. We just need to decide, what the program is and how much we want to spend on it. And then, we have 1% we can raise the UUT by, for example, and that we could do tomorrow if we wanted a couple $100,000. There's a lot of ways that we can, I think, find that flexibility financially. It's really more a question of figuring out, what do we want to do? What is going to get us, as you say, the most effective return on this investment? And I like your idea of saying, we're not going to pay you 50% of $6,000, because $6,000 on a lot of properties isn't going to do a lot of fire mitigation. We really want you to do that, a full fire mitigation project, and we will pay you up to $3,000, whatever the amount is, towards that. As long as you say, it's signed off on by somebody. One thing with the fire marshal, maybe I should have the fire marshal come out and just do an assessment on my house, and then I'd have a better understanding of what that involves. There are a lot of pieces that play into it. There's the fire safety piece, but then there are also building elements, there's sustainability elements and other things as well. And I know the fire district is generally fairly good at that. And from the work that I've seen that they've done where they're clearing underbrush and things like that in the public right of way and open spaces, they are fairly sensitive to that. But I don't know, for example, do they give you a list of contractors who'll do the work? Do they give you a list of materials? If they say you should replace your wood shingle roof, do they say, here's what you should replace it with, and here's who you should talk to about roofing, and here's a contractor who will replace your siding, and here's somebody else who will disconnect your deck from your house and move the fence over for you? And I think you really need to make it as easy for people as possible, and maybe working with the fire district on what they do to improve that. Maybe it's beefing it up with some other resources. That's where I feel we get the most bang for the buck. And yes, throw in some money to incentivize people to actually do the job and not just get the report on what they should do and say, hey, we'll give you a couple $1,000 to make sure you get going on it, because it is an incentive that works.
Jeremy.
Sorry to keep interjecting in this conversation. I recently had a conversation with representative of the South Marin Fire Department, and that community in Marin has benefited from a parcel tax. I'm not making any kind of recommendation on that now, but that has truly changed their ability to educate, to do mitigation, etc. One of the more exciting features that I was made aware of through that conversation was they developed a software, that's essentially a GIS tool, and imagine overlaid on that is a kind of a report that residents can get, where they can go in, see color-coded remediation issues on their property. And you can check box pictures of them, what the remediation should be, check box them, and move forward. And this has been funded by the parcel tax. And I recommended to the fire district that they take a look at this as a tool, because the tool is free essentially to us. The parcel tax was written in a way that any technology that was developed out of the parcel tax could be made available to other communities. So it's all these little pieces that we start to put together to make it easier and easier and easier for people to consider this, understand what the issues are, come up with a plan. It's intimidating, right? You don't know where to start, and you think it's going to cost X, and you think you need to do it all tomorrow, and none of that is true. So I wanted to add that as well, that there's all of these additional components that are being discussed and brought together through the committee, through my staff, through the council here to, I think, really amplify and make easier these opportunities. Thanks.
I just, kind of after listening to you guys, I think I want to make sure that I underscore that my intent in bringing this up also really is, I really do see this as a marketing tool and raising awareness and education. We know that, and also Woodside Fire does, Woodside does 3,000. I'm not suggesting we necessarily do 3,000, maybe 1,500. I don't know what the right number is. But I really look at this as an incentive, a way to market, a way to inspire people to do more, and a way to get more widespread community involvement, more unity around this issue, which has tended to be divisive in my experience since I've been serving on the council. The other thing is, as far as funding it, I learned recently, which I didn't realize, is that we have a lower UUT, is my understanding, than a lot of other communities. But in addition to that, I learned that we can raise it temporarily and then bring it back down. And so if there's a bump for kind of a need to get this thing going and get some funding, that seems like a really interesting possible tool to use. So that's all I wanted to add in kind of closing comments on this.
Yes, the UUT used to be higher and we lowered it. John, did your hand go up?
It did, yes. Yeah, I've been fairly resistant to the idea for quite a while, mostly because it seemed to me that with the models proposed before, that we would really need to put some kind of means test involved onto the whole system in order to not be funding people who are taking advantage of us, and to put it bluntly. But I think that with some of the discussions that's gone on tonight, that a more complex, probably more difficult model that would encompass a little more in the way of education and potentially some more creative fundraising methods. Perhaps still some kind of means test in certain cases. I think that I could get behind at least looking into a more robust way of putting it together. And certainly with possibly the help of the resource conservation group, we could put something together that would make a lot of sense and benefit the whole town, rather than just a few people who are willing to do a little bit of work in order to get a little cash from the town. So I want to approach it carefully, but I'm willing to entertain the idea now, I think.
Thanks, John. I was thinking the same thing. How can we fold RCD into this? There are 3 people in the public space some of whom have had their hands up for a long time. So I want to go to them for a sec. Dave Cardinal.
Sure. I think it's a great discussion. I think the big money, in a way, is making the prospect of a fire safe, if you will, house tangible. And one of the concerns everybody has is fire insurance. So if there was some way to spend the money to link the odds of your being able to get your fire insurance renewed at a reasonable rate, we probably spend 5 to 10 million on homeowners insurance in Portola Valley. And if we have to go to Lloyd's of London for it, it's going to be 10 times that. It'll be 50 to 100 million, which is a massive number compared to what we're talking about. So any way we could try and link that and help people have a better chance of keeping their insurance, I think would be a great way to market the program. Thanks.
Great. Jennifer Eustra.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There, great. Hi, I'm Jennifer Eustra. I work on the fire committee, but I also have a role as a WPV Ready block representative, and I have 22 residences that I work with on my block. I have found in my work that the combination of things going on in town government and being able to actually touch and get into the residences is really helpful to really understand how people are feeling and how they're approaching what they're going to do on their private property. I think this is a great opportunity to get collaboration, not only between the town and each of the residences, but through the use of WPV Ready and the network and the representatives we have there, a collaboration between the town, Woodside Fire, and the residences. Part of the problem that we have when we go to particular neighbors is where to start, Craig, just like you said. And I think every neighborhood is different. And every neighborhood has its unique challenges. Maybe you have a canyon, maybe it's about structure separation. And that type of nuance means that education is really hard unless you have someone standing there with you who has dealt with wildfires and can look at your property and assess these are the top 10 things you can do. That gets you through the state of wondering and onto action. And particularly if there's $3,000 matching that can be done, and it gets you to a list that's very specific and that has been vetted by a professional who's used to wildfire. I think if you use the WPV Ready system, you could probably take a neighborhood at a time, much like the Chipper program, and really try to get penetration of these evaluations quickly. And you go from knowledge to action in a week. If I could get my residents done in a week, in a week, I've got their list done, their call to action, and just something that they can start on from season to season and work through. I think there's also different sensibilities that people have. Some people have, a conservationist mindset. Some people want to cut a fire lane. And I think what's nice is they can sit there and they can talk through this with a fire professional on what's going to work for them, and make those decisions and come up with a solution that will also work for the community and keep it safer. So thank you for your time.
Full disclosure, Jennifer is one of the members of the fire committee that I was working with on the idea that I was talking before. So she's actually done a lot of work on, she's sort of helped lead that effort up on the canyon up above the Stanford property, and suggested a lot of things that I was trying to convey to you, but she probably did a better job of it. So thanks, Jennifer.
You're on mute, Marianne.
Hi, this is Rita. I'm one of the 22 homes that Jennifer was referring to. I second pretty much everything that she said. The town has a lot of resources. We have the wildfire committee, we have the emergency group. It seems like every single meeting talks about wildfire. I really like this idea of getting a fund. I'm not sure whatever happened with the fund that our town manager talked about in all the committee meetings last year, saying we're starting this fund. Perhaps some of those monies could go towards such a thing. But using that group that spoke earlier, I think they could possibly help us get some monies. And it sounded like from other previous meetings that the fire marshal had identified different hazards on different properties. There was some type of drive around assessment on different properties. So it sounds like we have a lot of information, as far as getting a parcel tax or some other type of tax from the residents to come up with new ideas. It seems a little the cart before the horse, rather utilizing the things and the information that we already know from all of these different committees and all this good work that's already been done, and then look into putting a fund together. But a parcel tax or some other type of tax, it just sounds like that'll be the focus, is raise the money. But we have all of this good information that we already know, and it would be nice to see some of that move forward, along with an evacuation plan. But fire mitigation is important. It may keep us from needing to utilize an evacuation plan, but I think it's great. Woodside has this type of program and it's helpful, and it might be an incentive. But I agree with Jennifer, talking to your neighbors, coming up with a plan, pointing some things out, utilizing the fire marshal, utilizing the information from the wildfire group, the emergency group, and all the other information we have before we then spend a lot of time and money to tax the residents to come up with more ideas. Thank you.
Okay, Carolyn.
Good evening. Thank you. I just wanted to give you a brief personal experience. I tried to work with Fire Chief Bullard, and yes, he recommended two landscape companies, and unfortunately they were twice as expensive or 3 times as expensive as the person that Fire Chief Anea recommended. So unfortunately my chat is disabled, so but I will be happy to forward the link, and yeah, that's what I wanted to share. But I don't think Portola Valley is the kind of community that wants to raise taxes and that wants to have people go and patrol personal property. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. As you know, I've been watching what Tahoe Donner's doing, and the way I support this program, to me, it goes with the chipping program, and educating on defensible space might be first. Then you have the chipping program, and then you hire somebody, and then you prove that you've spent the money by showing a receipt. I would just add that piece. But I do believe the fall and the winter is the time to create a healthy forest with fuel reduction zones, remove brush, mow brush around trees, remove ladder fields, logging hand crews. I mean, we could be doing a lot right now where we hire, we don't just we hire now, and we work on that and maintain our seasonal roads. We work with our 2 other, Mid-Penn and our other organizations that are in our community. But I see it as it goes along with defensible space education,
Go, Coco, that's
move your receipt. But I do think code enforcement, some people don't even know what they can do. And up at Tahoe Donner, they do write them. They just write, hey, doing a great job, or you could do this more, and they leave it on their doorstep. And now the person says, oh, they're kind of right. Wow, chipping's coming in 2 months. I better get on this. It's like a reminder. And then, they follow up if it hasn't been done. And we just talked about code enforcement. I see this, it could fit right in. Thank you.
Right, thanks. I am bringing it back to the council. What is your pleasure?
I don't know what would happen as a next step here. I guess my suggestion was if there was, I don't know if we need to take a vote that there's openness to this, and suggesting that we pass it on to the Wildfire Committee to, take a second look at this with this broader scope.
Yeah,
I think we're all open to it.
I think so too. And I think from what we've heard here, I think a program that, is whether it's with Woodside Fire directly or WPV Ready, or involves RCD maybe, to educate people to come to individual properties, take all of the information that we've learned from our various committees, from Woodside Fire, et cetera, but to have, a pot of money to pay for someone to go visit every property in Portola Valley, hopefully. And maybe it's probably neighborhood by neighborhood and structured around, doing clusters at a time. So you can say, hey, you and all your neighbors, this is your month. You guys should clean up your properties this month. And here's somebody who's going to come and work with you and evaluate each home, look at each thing, draw you up a list of here's your top 10 items in priority order, something like that. And then, have some money at the end. And if we can, whether it's, if the wildfire committee can work on putting that together, maybe with staff or with help from RCD, if they want to give us some people to help organize it and actually put the program together, I think we could, figure out where to get the money for it pretty quickly once there's a concrete program.
Jeff.
So yeah, so like Jennifer and I, as we both referred to, are talking about kind of this pilot where we go into like a few neighborhoods, probably through WPV. If we can pull something like that together, in a couple of neighborhoods in the next few months, we might get an idea of sort of participation, and we might even be able to experiment with just on a very small basis. Is there an incentive, a cash incentive that actually sort of makes a dent in this? And that might help us in terms of identifying a budget, because the amount of money we need to find for this could be negligible. I mean, we could discover that people are actually willing to do this without a huge incentive. We could realize that no, we actually really should be incentivizing any property that wants it. Maybe we do have to. We might, before we sort of get too far down into the mechanism of how we raise the money, there might be some ways to gauge sort of how much we would be serious about raising. Because I mean, it could turn out to be an amount that we're not really that we don't need to worry about allocating. It could be an amount we could easily find from somewhere. So I'm wondering if you're content to sort of let us start on with this pilot program that we're trying to flesh out right now. Maybe that could be a first step, and then we could come back with some what we learned from that. Maybe it might be winter or spring by the time we could get something rolled out, and then maybe have another discussion about what's a useful amount of money to raise, and whether that's a UUT increase or some other smaller step we take.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
I just have, I guess, questions. So Craig, to your comments, what I feel like I'm hearing from you, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, is you seem focused on, the assessment aspect. And what I'm wondering, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, my sense is there are resources out there who will do that kind of stuff for free, whether it be Woodside Fire. I actually had somebody come and review my property that Mary Ann referred me to. So I personally was thinking about it, and again, I want to defer to the Wildfire Committee to assess all of this, but I guess in my thinking, the small amount of money that we would be giving relative to what an ultimate size of a project was, I was at least thinking was going to go towards the mitigation work or the home hardening work or whatever it was versus the assessment. So just wanted to clarify that.
So when I'm talking about assessment, I'm talking about doing an assessment of every one of the 1,800 properties in Portola Valley. And if it takes 2 to 3 hours to do each one of those, yeah, there are people who will do it for free. Woodside Fire will do it for free. If you call them up, they'll do one property at a time. But if we're talking about doing this at scale, that is several full-time employees to do all of Portola Valley in a year. And, sooner than a year would be even better than that. So it's a scale that I don't think Woodside Fire is currently capable of doing. And yes, they can probably help us build a program and, train the people to go out and do the evaluations. But we might need money to just hire a bunch of people or temporarily hire a bunch of people to go out and do all of these evaluations, write up the reports, give it to people, talk it through with the homeowners, interface with WPV Ready, whatever it is. It's really, feet on the ground does cost money. And I don't think that those feet are currently out there. We need to go find them somewhere, and that might cost something.
My only concern with that, sorry, I know, John, I just want to real quick is, then we'd be doing an evaluation. We don't know if the homeowner is going to actually spend the money. So
Yeah, well, that would be the next part of it, is to have a program then to feed into actually doing it and paying for it. But go ahead, John.
As I understand it, there are private companies who will do this type of work and who are very well respected. And I could envision the town getting a bulk buy for a large portion of the town, at least, maybe if not all. And I think that would in itself be a draw to people. People like getting free things, and if it costs the town a little bit, it just might push us over the edge, and get things rolling. So I think that might be a first step to look at.
Yeah, so I would be willing to recommend that we throw this back over to the wildfire committee to come up with what is that concrete plan to get as many homeowners as we can in Portola Valley to have an assessment of what they need to do, and then give them whatever, kickstart financial assistance they might need to get them to start actually executing against that list of tasks. So get the list and then execute against the list, and what kind of a program can we put in place to make that happen? And then we can figure out how much that would cost and figure out how to pay for it.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think, just want to underscore, my agreement that the first step is scoping it, and then, leaning on the group and the wildfire committee for that. I think how we pay for it seems, part two, and kind of goes back to the town more versus that committee is kind of my thought.
Yeah, the ballpark of how much, back of envelope, I've sketched some numbers here that I'm not going to say out loud, but I don't think it's an amount of money that will be hard to pay for.
But what about Jeff's idea? Does that fit into this? Jeff's idea, you and Jennifer?
I think what we're saying is we'll continue on that idea, and that idea will actually, and if we can sort of carry that pilot exercise out in a few neighborhoods, that'll give us some feel for what our ultimate fundraising need might be, or what, it might help us kind of define the question of how much we want to raise. So I think everyone's comfortable. What's helpful for me going forward with the wildfire committee and the home hardening subcommittees, knowing that there is some willingness to put some sort of money into a program like this, even like on a per household basis. So that's a helpful step. And then I think we come back and we define what the actual monetary need might be after a few iterations of this.
Yeah,
So
I think an important element to me would be a program where we're not waiting for them to call us and say, hey, I'd like you to come do an assessment of my house. We are actively going out to everybody and saying, hey, you're going to get a hardening assessment unless you tell us not to.
or even just a like I was saying before, just your WPV ready captain comes along.
Exactly. It's
a bunch of your neighbors all get together.
Exactly.
You know what's happening. It's happening these 2 weeks. I mean, the one thing is, honestly, it's like the fact that I can pick up the phone anytime and call somebody and come out is one of the reasons I never do it, because it's just like, it's like I'll do it next week. You give people a date and like a process. It helps some people. So that's where we're going to start.
Okay. I think so. We've got this one nailed, correct?
Well, I think that the only thing, this is probably a nit, but I guess my point of view was to punt it back over to the wildfire committee
Yes.
What I'm hearing from Jeff is the, I
I'm
don't know.
open. I'm open.
If it's the assumption that it's the pilot program, I don't know what the right thing is. I kind of wanted to keep it open at this juncture and bring it to them. Maybe you already know that, Jeff, that's what they're going to say. But I think at this point, I just wanted to say, this is awesome. There's support here for this concept. We're sending it back to you guys and see what they say.
Your point is well taken.
Okay.
If we can think of a way to sort of make it happen faster than a neighborhood by neighborhood, sure. That I don't think anybody's going to oppose that. So,
yeah.
Okay.
May I ask, just so I capture this correctly here, what is the formal recommendation? Exactly.
I think I'm hearing that the formal recommendation is that the council would like the wildfire committee to take a second look at developing, some sort of fund for fire mitigation or some sort of program for fire mitigation on private property, whether it's, any of the three categories of what that is, and have them assess kind of what the scope and the program could be.
Thank you.
And then we'll figure out the funding as part 2.
Next. Yes, good. All right. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us, Sarah. Now, thank you for bringing it to us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to take a really tiny break, or do you want to go forward?
I'll take a tiny break, like 2 minutes.
Okay, well, let's do
5.
Okay.
10 o'clock.
Yes, come back at 10 o'clock. Good.
Give him
So we can start with that, Jeremy, can't we? For this part. All righty, let's move on to item number 14, Council Liaison Committee and Regional Agency Reports. Who would like to begin? Greg.
My one committee meeting for the 2 weeks was BPTS, and they did not have a quorum, so no meeting.
Weren't you at the committee meeting of the committee chairs?
Yes. Were you not all there?
I was there too. Remember
Oh,
you?
the 2 of us.
Yes. Would you
I
like
don't
to?
have any. I don't have any notes from that, so I'll leave it for you.
I'll report on it. All right. Okay. Who would like to speak next?
I'll go next because I'm also very short. I didn't have any committee meetings. The only liaison function I had was attending a luncheon at the Sequoias with their leadership team. I think everybody knows that Rob Hayes has resigned. Their head of Sequoia Living was there, and a couple people from the members from their council, and Sue Crane, of course, and everybody was kind of happy to have, I guess you guys have had these lunches annually in the past, and it was the first one since COVID, so it was nice. And I had never eaten at the Sequoias, so that was fun. That's it.
All right. John.
Okay, I had several, but I'll try to make them quick. Emergency preparedness. I think the biggest item on discussion was how to make sure that the EOC was up and running, given our new software in the event of a outage of the internet. So a lot of discussion about the use of satellite phones and other ham radios and that sort of thing. But I did also attend a meeting with Jeff and one of the members of the Dale, was it, that where Brandy did a run through of the new software for remote emergency preparedness work. I also will work with all kinds of other applications like project management. It looks really good, and Emergency Preparedness Committee was pretty excited about it. So that was most of that. An ASCC meeting. where there were two projects, 333 Canyon remodel addition, bringing up to residents up to 99% of FAR for the property. That was approved. And 460 Cervantes, another one that was approved. It did have some artificial turf included in the project, and the Conservation Committee asked that that be removed. The ASCC gave them the option of putting it in the backyard where it wasn't visible. And let's see, the race and equity meeting, which you were at, Marianne, that discussed the experience of the picnic, had a great set of exchanges with the public about talking about the town seal. And then the committee came up with several projects that they're talking about working on during the next year, setting up subcommittees to look at town ordinances, the town seal review, outreach to locally employed folks who work in town, creating opportunities for increased awareness of a place for people to come and work with. Let's see, that was a opportunity to talk to someone who, for people who have issues they'd like to discuss about equity in town. These are just all topics that are under current discussion and will be brought back to the main committee for further work and decide what, if anything, they want to do with them. Then I had one other, but I don't remember what it was. No, that was it.
Okay, Jeff.
Okay, wildfire preparedness met last Tuesday, the 2nd. Spent the bulk of the meeting talking about part of the NFPA fire standard that deals with 30-foot building separations. The proposal was to ask us to adopt that part of NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association standards. Eventually it came to a vote and it deadlocked 4-4. I think several people, myself, there was a lot of discussion. It was clear there were a lot of sort of ambiguities or some confusions about how that part of NFPA 1140 would be applied, and half the committee felt they were not comfortable sort of moving forward. Fire Marshal Boulder was there. He is looking at NFPA and several aspects of NFPA, probably maybe even all of it as the basis for our next fire code. So it is in the process of being considered for adoption. But I felt it was sort of premature for us to try to be doing that outside of Don's work. A few people agreed with me, so it's, for the moment, it's not coming. They're not asking us to do that. That was the bulk of that meeting. Planning Commission met on then the next night on the November 3rd, and that was consideration of the Neely's application for the tasting room. 4.5-hour meeting. A lot of comments. Made most of it perfectly. Everything was. It wasn't contentious. And it wasn't combative. A lot of people's opinions on both sides. Ultimately, the commission has sort of. I think they've reached a point where they're. I think at the next meeting they're planning to have something they can approve. They were going to iron out a few details specifically around kind of. Events at the tasting room, but they did eventually reach a point where I think they were ready to sort of move forward. So I think their next meeting they probably will be coming to a final vote for the tasting room there. Those were my 2 town meetings. Hold on, let me just double check. But yes, Parks and Rec was canceled, and Nature and Science meets tomorrow.
Okay, along with Jeff, Craig, attended the committee meeting with committee chairs that is held quarterly. Is that correct, Jeremy? And Jeremy was there. A lot of chairs were there. Dave Ross, Teresa Godfrey, Craig Taylor, Nancy Lennon, John Myers, Judy Murphy, Chris Bouja, Dale Fow. I mean, maybe there was others. And it was pretty substantial conversation. They talked about increase in people attending the meeting since they're virtual and they're easy to attend. But with an increase in people comes more of a challenge in running the meeting. Sometimes Dave Ross says, sometimes he has to remind folks about the ASCC's jurisdiction, for example. Let's see. And there was a little talk about, how do you guys feel about doing Zoom versus in person? And there were some mixed feelings on that. There was a discussion about the future of field meetings, as you know, in the ASCC. That's kind of on hold because the way we've been doing it is perhaps not legal because of ADA compliance, et cetera. And I believe this is eventually going to come to us. But Dave has made a comment that we're getting into an era of less and less discretionary review on applications, which is probably true. Talked about some projects that are coming up, such as the Willows. ADUs, SB9 came up, and flyer, the usual stuff. Let's see what else. There was a question, are new committee members showing up? We actually have a lot of new committee members, and we actually have some younger members. For example, Equity now has I think is he a high schooler? Goes to the Priory.
Yeah.
He's high school, Cole.
Is it Cole Kalaja? Yeah, he's a freshman.
Amazing. Sorry.
Anyway, we have a lot of new energy in the committees. And then there was a discussion of what do you do about misinformation that's presented by people at committees? How do you deal with that? And then there was a lot of go back and correct the record and also keep reminding people about what's happening in housing, what's happening with Stanford, what's happening with fire. Judy had an idea to do this like the conservation tip of the month, housing update tip of the month or week, Stanford update tip of the week, fire update tip of the week. And then there was a discussion about what's the line between giving people too much information and not enough information. That was talked about. And then I also was at the Race and Equity Committee. Let me fill in a few things. Again, those meetings are always really, really packed. We welcomed our new member. They did give that review of the picnic. Do you guys understand why they want to talk about redoing the seal? The town seal. Do you know what the town seal looks like?
I don't.
It's the
It's a guy on horse. Is it Gaspar de Portola on horseback?
yes, he started the missions, and you know how those were just a little bit bad for the native peoples.
Slavery. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Slavery and genocide, stuff like that. So they think that perhaps they could do a better job. So they're going to be working on that, and we'll see where they go with that. What else? Let's see. There was an update from Andrew, because Andrew sits on the Housing Element Committee. So he gave a lot of his thoughts about what's happening. They are going to have they have their own little housing subcommittee to deal with other things regarding housing in town that beyond the housing element. And that will be Lucy and Andrew, and I don't know, is Judy on that one too? They're all signed up for a lot of things. Okay, what else? So you talked about, they all signed up to do 1 or 2 projects. So there's the SEAL project that like 4 of them are working on. There's the housing group. Gwen and Andrew are going to work on looking at all our ordinances and policies. Then there's the outreach to town employees. Then there's the, how do we attract more people of color to the town outside of the housing? Outside of, building more housing. And let me see if there's anything else. I think that's it. Oh, Kim wants to work on the land acknowledgement. Which Ohlone tribe should we acknowledge? This was an interesting one. Remember how we said it was the Ramaytush, remember? But apparently the ranch, people in the ranch say, no, those are not, it was what, the Mwakma or some other tribe. So they want to delve into that. Okay, so they talked about, the neighborhood watch signs. You didn't discuss that. So Andrew said that his people, meaning his wife and daughter, who are both African-American, feel that the neighborhood watch signs are offensive, that it is reminiscent of the old days about, the covenants in the CCNRs and the sundowner towns. And it's creepy, the owl is creepy. So we had a discussion about how it took a really long time to get to the signs, we went through so much, and that it's pretty much a non-starter, that we're going to get rid of the signs. And he said he would take that information, and we talked about where it came from, why they decided to do these signs rather than the standard. And he said he would take that information back to his people and see what they say. Okay. Never got to the Manzanita Works proposal, which has been on, this will be the second agenda where they didn't get to it. Okay. And then the only other thing I did was I attended the lunch with Sarah and Jeremy at the Sequoias, and it was lovely. And Sue Crane let me borrow a book about a major figurative painter, David Park, whose daughter wrote the book, and she is a resident of the Sequoias, and it is quite a book. Okay, Jeremy, your turn.
Okay. I actually think you all covered most of what I was going to cover. John talked a bit about the virtual EOC exercise. I mean, just add maybe a little more information. It was pretty exciting to see the tool being introduced to half the staff, and I understand that there were some really good comments from the from those who observed, including the chair of EPC. So I was really happy about that. Brandy's been spending a tremendous amount of time getting comfortable with that program and getting up to speed. So I think it really showed during the meeting. Mentioned the Sequoia's lunch. Yeah, you guys mentioned everything. I did a bunch of stuff you guys were doing too. So I will stop. That's my report. Thank you.
Great. Council digest for October 28th.
Can I just really quickly, I know I'm out of turn. I meant to mention this before, just a heads up. Finance Committee is looking for some additional people. And I know Nancy Lund would appreciate some help. Somebody who is passionate about documenting and being organized and that kind of thing. So just a heads up about those two needs.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay. Digest on the 28th. Does anyone want to discuss anything on there? Number 8, I am not running for re-election for my Fizzler seat. It's a fantastic board, but I'm going to step aside and let someone else have a turn because it's a very hot board. Okay. Weekly digest, November 4. Nope. All right, then that concludes another fine council meeting. And this will be my last full meeting as mayor.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So good night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.